Welcome back, conscious monkeys, to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. I'm your host, Clayton, and on this episode, we are joined by Lauren Fisher. Lauren, I can't remember exactly how we got introduced. It was probably through James. And so if anyone has seen James's episodes, Lauren has actually been mentioned in a couple stories that James has. And hopefully we'll get to those at some point. But before then, Lauren, how are you doing?
I am doing great, man. It's been a wild ride over the past few months, and I am enjoying the little bit of downtime that I have right now. It feels really good to just restore and be back in a routine, and just soaking in everything that has been coming my way over the past few months.
That's awesome. And that's probably something helpful for people to point out is like, once you're coming out of this, like weirdness of the weekend or the holidays, it can usually be difficult to kind of get back into a routine of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Especially with, you got to think about like the emotional and the energetic aspects behind the holidays too. For me personally, I don't have family here in San Diego where I'm at. So holidays do tend to feel a little bit lonely. And when you couple that with the events that occurred during 2021 for me, which was an exponential year of growth, I found that it all came kind of crashing down within the last couple of days of the year. And I really felt the weight of everything. So it took a lot of patience and a lot of just giving myself some grace and knowing like, hey, you just went through some shit, like chill, like you can relax, restore, rejuvenate, and just really begin to soak it all in.
What are some things that you do to like tell yourself to relax and to restore? And how do you kind of know when you're at a point in your life where you need to do that?
For me, whenever the overwhelm and anxiety manifests for me, it manifests very physically. So I'll be in physical pain in my body, whether that is tension in the back or my hips tend to get really tight, or just this overwhelming feeling of being emotionally put out. Like I know I'm not okay, but I can't put a finger or a label or identify what exactly am I feeling. So a couple months ago, it's interesting that you brought this up. It's one of my favorite self-care habits. A friend recommended that I make a self-care menu because I was talking to her about all these, things I was feeling and not knowing really where to go, how to navigate or get to a place I wanted to be because I couldn't identify or label where I was at in the moment. And she told me, drop that shit. Don't label what you're feeling. Make what she called it, a self-care menu. So you take aspects that or activities, whatever that are going to make you feel better and put you in a good place, and write them down. And what you do next to each of them is you write a little note about how it makes you feel. So for example, one of my favorite self-care activities is tub time. I love a bath. I love a nice soak in the bathtub. And my note next to that is, I feel warm and relaxed. So which is important for me because my anxiety manifests a lot as cold. I get really, really chilly. My hands and my feet lose just any heat in them. So for me, knowing that, okay, I don't know how I feel right now, but I know if I get in that tub, I will feel warm and relaxed at the end of it. Is that something I want to feel? So you kind of go through these lists of things and you prescribe yourself your own medicine that works for you. There's going outside for a walk, taking care of my plants, working out. I feel energized and motivated. So little things like that just to keep in your back pocket, in the back of your mind, knowing that you can heal yourself with your own practices.
Yeah, something I want to emphasize there that really stuck out to me is how you're saying like heal yourself with your own practices. Mm-hmm. Because a big kind of mental shift I've been on, and maybe this has kind of shown itself in some of the recent podcasts, is that you can, I am truly on this thing, we are our own creators of reality. And so often we kind of put our trust into external or sources outside of us, Western medicine, for instance, with the prescriptions and the laundry list of side effects it has. And it feels like at some level that it's, you're susceptible to it because it's like, okay, they're a doctor, we're supposed to believe them. But what you're doing is almost relinquishing that power back for yourself and saying, well, if I do this, my body feels like this. If I do this and I'm feeling in this way and I want to get to, a place of happiness or a place of feeling warm, let's say, you have your own kind of medicine that you've created to get you from where you're at to where you want to be.
Absolutely. It is definitely relinquishing power from the programming that we have been, we've been told works. And it really is a step into yourself, knowing what works for you, trying on different things to see if that works, and really taking note of in your body, like, what does that feel like for you? And is this medicine for you? Like, for some people, their medicine might be, I'm going to, go for a run. For me, that's torture. That's not going to make me feel good. That is not going to put me in a good headspace. If anything, it's going to stress me out or make me feel any sort of way about myself, usually negative, because I only run when chased. So just, it's a different level of diving deep and knowing, what is your medicine? Is it singing? Is it dancing? Because we all have this internal knowledge and knowing of what works for us and what can heal us too. We're all healers, and that's what's really beautiful about it.
And something that I come from more of like an engineering background and a little bit more of a logical, like dominant side of my brain, where getting in touch with my feelings is something I have only recently been doing in the last year or two. Is there like a practice that you do or you have seen before that would help someone who is logically minded and help them get into their body a little bit more, whether it be like some sort of movement or some sort of internal practice?
I love this question because I have a lot of ideas bouncing around in my head right now. As someone who is very heart space guided and I really value embodiment as well. It's difficult for me to put into words just because it's so second nature to me. And it wasn't until I started doing coaching that I realized and encountered people, like what you said, don't really have that knowledge or knowing or have never practiced getting into their body before. So I think that the simplest place to start, and well, I shouldn't say simple, it's an easy place to start. It's never really simple, right? So it really comes into, you're in a space where you're feeling something and you don't know what you're feeling. And it takes almost stepping aside, whether that's physically removing yourself from a situation or just taking a breath and looking inward. And what I like to do is when I feel out of body, like right now I'm touching my legs because I am a little nervous about chatting about all this. It's not often I get to, go into the depths of these conscious conversations. So it's a lot of excitement and anxiety, and those go hand in hand, right? But taking a second to touch your physical body and remind yourself, this is here, this is reality, and your hands will know. It's really cool. Your hands know. Your hands are awesome. They're these portals into experiencing so much, right? And we carry a lot of energy in our hands as well. So taking a second to tune in, just take a breath and placing your hands wherever you intuitively feel that they need to go, because your intuition is right, Right. And that's one practice that you can do just to remind yourself, okay, I am in my body. And then from there, you start to explore, maybe not labeling the emotion, but where do I feel it? Is it in my throat? Is it in my head? Is it in my stomach? Is it in my legs? Is it in my hands? And then kind of going down not going down, but exploring what comes up.
Seeing like what energies kind of move and feel, right? So if I were to break that down in a sense, you're essentially saying like to take your hands and, if you're in this logical mindset, well, you can logically feel your external body, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's taking that process to realize, well, like there's something, if you put your hand on your chest, it's like, okay, but that's not exactly where, let's say, the anxiety or the feeling of intuition comes from. It's like a little bit inside that or a little bit below that. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of the path that you're going with that?
I think so. I think I'm picking up what you're putting out there. It's more or less, for me, it's very grounding. And it's, let's say you're nervous and you're not sure how to respond, what to do. You take, you just close your eyes, take a breath, and you put your hands anywhere that feels right, and really just tuning into it kind of anchors you into this reality, and this physical reality that you're experiencing, and knowing that it is real, and begin to explore emotions underneath that.
And it's kind of just, it kind of goes and takes a mind of its own at that point, mm-hmm. of going inward a little bit.
Absolutely.
Well, I feel like we got off to a pretty strong start there.
Sure did.
I was planning to ask you what the first thing you wanted to do, but we got on a little bit of a tangent there.
Absolutely. It happens.
I love it. It's all supposed to happen as it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a step back then. And one of the first questions I love asking people, and I feel like it's a great way to get to know that childlike figure of someone, is, what was the first thing that little Lauren wanted to be whenever, she grew up?
Little Lauren. Well, if you ask my mom, she'll tell you, because it was true. I wanted to be Michael Jordan. I love the movie Space Jam. Okay. My parents even bought me a basketball hoop, which is funny knowing me now, because if you know me now, I'm a yay sports ball kind of person. It's not something I follow or really have taken on like an understanding. Over the past couple of years working in a sports bar, I've, accumulated more knowledge of all the sports. But the first thing I remember wanting to be growing up was a veterinarian.
Okay.
Grew up with a huge passion for animals and still hold that passion. And all I wanted to do was, heal.
That's where like the whole healing journey even mm-hmm. began, was seeing that. Did you have any pets growing up?
Oh my gosh, did we? So I grew up, I grew up in rural Ohio, southeastern Ohio, right on the river, right by West Virginia, cue the banjos. And we lived on this really awesome property in the middle of nowhere. It was about, I would say it was about 40 minutes from even the nearest grocery store. We lived on about 200 acres, and we had all the animals. We had dogs, we had cats, we had chickens, we had goats, wow. We had cows and horses, and my dad even kept bees. So he had 7 beehives in the backyard. So it was a really, really amazing way to grow up. I wouldn't change it for the world.
That's really cool. Did you have a favorite of all those variety of farm animals?
Yeah, I loved horses. Still do.
Horses.
Yeah, they're rad. Working with them is it's very therapeutic. They're powerful mirrors. They reflect emotion and trauma and energy so potently and powerfully. 'Cause like when you're on a horse, they know when you're nervous, and they reflect that behavior. So you really have to go into it with a mindset of, where am I at right now?
That's actually really interesting you say that, because I guess I've never really looked at animals in that light. Like dogs mm-hmm. are always happy to see you. Cats seem like they're a little on edge all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But you think horses, I guess, now is it, I guess horses, when you say reflect your emotions, is it like if you're excited, they'll be excited. If you're mm-hmm. skittish, they'll be skittish.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this is why you always kind of need to come present whenever you're approaching them or about to work with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's why they're such powerful horses. They're powerful healers in their own way. You'll see it's very common to have therapeutic horsemanship programs for people diagnosed with many, many disabilities, autism, OCD, PTSD, really anything, because it gives you a chance to it's almost like gaining a deeper understanding of the way you present yourself. And horses do reflect that, and they hold a great patience and a great love and a great expression too of their own. It's really beautiful to witness.
So I have been around horses, but I haven't, I guess, looked at them in this energetic light of sorts. Is there, I guess I'm trying to like wrap my head around how that, like I can feel what you're saying and I can kind of understand, but I'm trying to like bridge the gap in a logical sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, if someone came up to you and was like, okay, a horse is a great healer. It's like, what are you talking about, man?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Absolutely.
So, you know, is there a way we can kind of bridge that gap a little more of saying like a horse, I guess I'm kind of struggling for words a little bit here, but it's like, do you have something you can add to it?
Yeah, I think I can give you a really beautiful example of how I've seen a horse heal. So
Okay.
I volunteered with a therapeutic horsemanship program out in Lakeside, California for a couple of years. And they worked with a very wide spectrum of children and adults with disabilities, right? And I remember one day, one of the kids, we won't give names, but or any type of diagnosis, but he was having a bad day, right? He was very put out. He was having a tantrum, so to speak, for lack of a better word, just wasn't in a space to communicate with any person around him. So we brought one of the horses. I'll tell you the horse's name. His name is Ricky. He's hilarious. He is such a funny soul. But, you know, first, during these sessions, we have like ground horsemanship work, right? So, you know, like the patient, or not the patients, the person doing the work will, you know, groom the horse, lead the horse, be on the ground working with the horse, like that. So we were very, very, you know, very fresh into this session, and this little guy, he just wasn't having it. He wouldn't even approach Ricky. He just was so put out. So, and in this instance, Ricky became very high energy and really kind of skittish because he felt what that little guy was feeling. And, then I remember the little guy, he started to cry. He was really, really sad. And I kid you not, Ricky on his own dropped his head and walked straight on face to face with this little guy, and like almost forehead to forehead, like, I mean, big, tall horse dropping his head to a child of about, gosh, I think he was maybe 8 years old, and just putting his face right in front of him, almost to communicate and say like, it's okay. And finally the little guy was able to reach out and touch, and we were able to proceed through the session. And it really just took Ricky's understanding in this is his own equine intuition to approach the boy, reflect that, and get him into a place of calmness too.
Wow.
It's powerful.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
That is powerful. You can kind of just, you can even feel it in that story.
Yeah. And it's interesting because even just the energetics behind touching a horse, their heartbeat is substantially lower than ours resting. So when your when your energetic field walks into their, you know, meshes with their energetic field, and you're able to physically touch that horse, your heart rate automatically lowers. Brings you into a space of calm, because heartbeats and that frequency sync up. You see it with people too, person to person. It happens with all entities across the board.
Well, and that's something that I can even feel over like having these interviews or these podcasts with people, is like whenever one person starts to, you know, get into an excited state, let's say, or, you know, gets energized about something, I can feel that kind of like bouncing off within myself. And depending on the conversation, you can kind of go with it. Or there's sometimes where you need to like kind of calm yourself back down and be like, okay, like relax. And it's really interesting to be able to see that dynamic at work in between humans, let alone, you know, you bring a horse into the mix, which is, I mean, obviously magnitudes larger. And then another fact of that is that their heartbeat's even slower, which I didn't even know about beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to think about the larger the animal, the slower the heartbeat, right? If you're a mouse, your heart's going to beat substantially faster than a human, than an elephant, just with how the body works. But yeah, I totally feel you on feeling people's energy, even through, you know, the internet or some kind of technology. You do feel that it is real. I feel it in person with people, and I feel it over calls with clients too, which are done virtually. And I didn't think I would going into that, but you truly do pick up on that shared energy. And I think it all comes from, we all come from up here, right? You can connect with anyone's energy through this divine space, and through spirit, which we all have. I mean, we're all our own expressions of this greater consciousness. So we are all connected for sure. Animals, humans, plants, all of it.
And that kind of steps into, I'm not sure which one it would be, but like clairvoyance or clairvoyance. What are the other ones? Like not really telepathy, but kind of where you can just, you know, feel that different energies that someone's going through, or even if it's just text messages, like you can tell based on, I don't even know what it is anymore, but based on either their, right, like their language or the spacing in their text, or, you know, there's this weird, like, you know, I don't know if it's a mixture of the energy that I'm putting out, and then they are also reciprocating or what, but you can feel this offness. And there have been times where I'm even like, okay, something feels off here, and just even calling it out. And they're like, oh yeah, like I'm feeling bad today, or, you know, my day isn't going well. And it's just, it's a really crazy thing that is so difficult to put into words, especially if you're coming from a logical mindset, to be able to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really just takes this, for me, I step into that space really easily where, like, of course we're all connected. Of course, like I can feel what you feel and you feel what I feel, even through a text message, email, whatever, because, and I think a lot of that is guided by intuition as well, and knowing how you feel and how you act when you have a bad day. So you can relate to that. We can all relate to each other. We just got to give each other the chance to do it. And I like that you said clairvoyance or telepathy, because what's cool about that is we're all capable of it, right? We all have that gift of empathy and knowing and intuition. And so that's really where it comes from. Granted, some people are, I don't want to say gifted, but more in tune with that naturally. But it is definitely a skill that we all have. And that's why we can all pick up on if someone is having a bad day and you just notice that energy is different, right?
Right. And maybe this is an interesting thing that I'd love to get your opinion on is, you know, you have all these different, let's say, magical superpowers, if you will, where it's like astral projection or lucid dreaming or telepathy or clairvoyance. And I guess I see them as this whole, you know, realm of magical superpowers, for lack of a better phrase, or spiritual superpowers. And like you said, and I've noticed where people are just far more in tune with this. I've been trying to lucid dream for the last 6 months, and I've done it twice. Meanwhile, I talk to people and it's like they've been lucid dreaming since they were a kid and didn't even know how to do it. Mm-hmm. Now, something I've been thinking is, well, maybe I'll ask you, as for starters, have you ever thought about why there is that incongruency in people? Because like I completely agree that some people are better at it, but we all have the ability to do it. Mm-hmm. So have you ever, I guess, first of all, put thought into why that might be, these differences between people and their spiritual superpowers?
I have put thought into it. And so I don't know how out there you want to get, but I like to go
for it.
I like to
go for it.
I think it all comes down to the soul. So when the moment that you enter this world and this physical body that you're in, your soul chose that, even down to the minute, the second that it enters your body, right? And your soul carries gifts and karma from past lives too. So I think that the people that are seemingly more in tune with these gifts and these abilities are carrying that through a past life or some kind of past spirit or soul contract even into this life. And that's why they can experience things a little bit differently or a little bit more in tune or alive, however you want to say that, whatever resonates for you. And we're all capable of it, obviously, but it really just comes down to what is your soul here to do in this lifetime? What are your soul contracts? What are your gifts? What are your medicine as well? And taking time to learn that and to step into it and also remember these abilities, right? Because we've all had them in this life, in previous lives. And it takes just kind of this stage of like evoking what was there and what you have now, because your soul is unique and your soul is special. And we all have different gifts, yet we're all capable of very same things. So that's kind of my thought on it.
Okay. So I've been following like a very similar mindset, I guess, like where you're talking about kind of the soul, you know, we all have our individual soul and these soul contracts. Well, so maybe before going too deep into that, maybe we should spend a second discussing that, because I'm not sure if that's something we've discussed on this podcast before. So I guess the basic idea, right, is that, you know, we all have our own soul, our own watcher, right, who is watching all of this, our feelings, our emotions. You know, it's like we're just this soul in a meat sack, right, having a human experience.
Right.
And well, I'm just going to push the conversation forward, because I'm still a little like kind of, how do you describe it? Like, I believe it, but it's just like, it's one of those things like you feel like it's true, but there's not like a logical, like materialistic thing that you can point to and say, oh yeah, this is right.
Yeah,
you know?
no, it's not tangible at all. It's something that that is really belief, which, I mean, belief is the most powerful force in the world, right? So I think it comes down to this whole idea of karma, and that's why people have such different experiences throughout their lives, right? So if your soul enters this world, like let's say my soul wanted to burn off a lot of karma or a lot of bad karma from previous lives in one lifetime, it means that I'm going to experience exponentially more hardship to learn these lessons that I didn't learn in my last life, right? Whereas someone might be like, I just want to burn off this much, because your soul decides that before it enters your body. It knows what it wants to work on. It knows what it wants to achieve. It just takes us remembering and knowing and realizing like that's what's happening.
So then how do you go about, because, you know, I guess a way I look at it, right, is you have this huge landscape of knowledge, or the infinite knowledge of the universe, and you have to fit it, you know, and then you're, I guess, just even a fraction of that. Your soul is just a fraction of the infinite space. I want to refrain from using the word God, but the infinite of the infinite being, let's say, the infinite collective conscious, and your soul then is a subset or a fraction of that. And then you then choose a human body, you're saying, and I don't want to say you're saying this, I completely am on board with it, but I just, for the sake of delineating this, that you choose a body to come into, and so when you enter that body, you forget your contracts, right? Or how do you kind of bridge that gap of like remembering that like, how do you remember from a kid that like, oh yeah, well, I'm actually like a soul that's not from this planet, that's just using this body to clear debt, clear karmic debt, and I need to do X, Y, Z, let's say, in this lifetime. Like, what's the process look like to remembering that?
That's tricky. And gosh, I'm no expert on these. These are just my own little thoughts that I've developed from what I've heard, and just kind of piecing together how I want to experience this, you know, this earth school, for lack of a better word. But I think a lot of that has to do also with the age of your soul in general. The older your soul is, the more wise it is. And I think not easier, but the more smoothly your soul is to remember, I think that younger souls, they're still figuring it out. They're still collecting karma. They're still working through the beginnings of whatever they're going through. And those with an older soul, they're going to remember more quickly because they've done it again and again and again in lives over and over and over. And your soul and your knowledge remembers this. So some people can more quickly wake up to the fact that this is not my first time here. This is not my first experience. And this is why this keeps happening to me, or why this lesson keeps presenting myself. Because so often times, I know from my personal experience, the same lesson presents itself over and over and over again until I get it right, because that is a contract. And the older your soul is, like you've done this again and again and again, so you remember a lot more quickly.
Because there's been so many repeated patterns throughout your reincarnations on Earth as a human that it keeps like presenting itself to you.
Exactly. Yeah. Lesson, maybe not the same lesson, but that same pattern of I am being hit with the same lesson over and over again. And this is not the first time this has happened. Maybe it was a different lesson in a previous life, but I think you pick up a little bit more quickly.
You see it a little bit faster almost. Mm-hmm. You can kind of, and this kind of ties into, I want to tie this in because I just talked about this in the last podcast. Neville Goddard. Are you familiar with him at all?
I know the name, but gosh, I couldn't tell you.
So as a quick overview, his whole thing, he lived in like the early 1900s, and his whole thing is that like your subconscious is God, and your consciousness is essentially, your conscious mind is essentially your subconscious projecting onto your outer world. So, it's like his whole thing is kind of like those negative thought loops you have. It's like you're making these subconscious imprints that you will then see in your external world. So it's like if you're continuously telling yourself negative thoughts, then it'll get imprinted on your subconscious, thus creating this in your physical world. It'll manifest essentially into your physical world. Mm-hmm. And so with that, from that perspective, I am trying to play with and see how, if you're able to take things from this physical world, and to tie it into what you were saying, right? There's lessons that you keep being taught where it's like, I don't know, say abusive relationship, cheating. I guess I'm going to relationships are the only thing that come into mind. Mm-hmm. Financial instability, can't hold a job, things like these. And so there's, like you're saying, like those are physical things that are occurring that, you're keep being shown a lesson, but not realizing you need to fix yourself almost. Mm. And so then I'm trying to see if there's a way you can kind of warp in does it become earthly desires that you're trying to, here's what, I apologize. This feels like a really long.
You're so fine. I'm all about it.
I'm just trying to like go on this like path of figuring this out. So let's take a step back onto what you were saying with like the soul and, you have these contracts that you come in with. Well, now I'm a human and I have these desires, these humanistic desires, whatever they are, anything from money to love to, everything in between, power. There's all these things we want as a human being, which our soul probably doesn't even care about, right? Because at the end of the day, we're transcending to a different mythical, spiritual dimension that has no, I want to say real bearing on reality, but that's a tough way to put it.
Yeah, and it does get tricky when you're trying to interweave it. I feel like the answer is almost too simple. I mean, as far as, you know, that whole idea of manifesting, like being in a negative thought loop and then manifesting only bad things. Maybe the bridge there is learning how to get yourself out of this negative thought loop, because this is a lesson you have to learn that you didn't learn previously. Maybe in the last life you did suffer from the same things of only attracting the bad, of only attracting the negative, and you didn't quite get there. So of course in this life you're going to experience that again. And as we know, these negative mindsets, these negative thought patterns, they only attract those low vibrational things. So the lesson in that, I mean, that you could be carrying, or maybe it's something completely different, is getting how to get out of that and how to cultivate this power of manifestation that you have in a positive light, a higher vibration. I don't know if that answers what you're saying, but
no, I appreciate you saving me a little. I feel like I'm I might be overthinking it, which is what it kind of sounds like or feels like I'm doing, because it's almost like, you know, I guess the question becomes, and maybe this is what I'm getting at, is it possible as a human to overwrite your soul contracts that you had when you came into here? So like, for example, say as a soul, you know, I want to clear my karmic baggage of, I don't know, being not as truthful as I should be, or I should be as honest as I possibly can be. And then, you know, I come here to Earth and it's like, well, I want to use my power of knowing the power of deceit. I want to use that to my ability now that I'm here on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is like, can you use that to kind of imprint that on your subconscious and carry that out, thus rewriting your soul contract? Or
carry out the deceit, or moving past into truthfulness? Because I think that the soul has more power than that we give it credit for. We love to give ourselves power as humans, right? We love to say that, like, we can overcome and we can do and we can figure it out. But my personal belief is that there are higher powers that, and your soul is a part of that higher power that determines what you are going to learn in this life and in your next and in your next and in your next. And I think also that the environment you're in has a lot. I feel like if there's going to be any human impact on that, it's going to be the environment you're in, who you're surrounding yourself with, your family, you know, these nature versus nurture aspects. I think that could definitely sway this idea of overcoming a soul contract, left or right, this way or that way.
Okay. I think I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I also think that I'm probably overcomplicating it, or beyond my understanding at this point. So I'm trying to...
It's a big one, you know, it's something, and it's hard when it's so ethereal I mean, it's out there. You can't reach out and grasp and show or read or, you know, physically touch that. It's something that you just kind of have to, you know, go down these rabbit holes about, maybe overthink it. And from that comes clarity too, right?
Right, because you can, and this is kind of what I've noticed with meditation, is that if I ever get into these meditative states, sometimes I'll just like let my mind go, and you know, maybe I'll have like a certain thing I'm fixated on, fixing in my life, you know, whether it be why am I anxious, right? And I'll just like let my mind go and just see what thoughts come up, and it's this like, oh well, it becomes this internal dialogue of kind of what you just experienced me doing right there, where it's a little bit of craziness, and it's like, well, maybe it's a little bit of this, or well, maybe it's a little bit of that, and it's kind of this back and forth of finding that middle ground of where the truth lies.
Absolutely. And that is, the power of being able to take a step back from your thoughts, not identify with them and watch them go by. Like, what are the qualities of these thoughts? Like, what is the theme? What is the pattern? And where does the truth for me, for the individual, lie in that? Because it's so unique to everyone. Even when you break it down into specific, like just like a word, like let's say like freedom, like that means something completely different for me as it does to you probably. Or the idea of anxiety, it's so individual, it's so unique to every person. And to be able to step back and watch those go by and come to your own understandings, like that is where the power comes from. And that is spirit coming through you, downloading these insights and this wisdom too.
Right. And yeah, and I also found it funny that you basically made this, for people listening, she basically made like this funnel shape over her head. So it's kind of like it starts off big, and then, you funnel down into a point, which is then your consciousness. And I always find that as such a fascinating description, right? Because, let's say at the very top of that funnel would be our collective consciousness. And then as you're getting down towards the middle, you start talking about like your soul, right? We're like, there's an idea that we're essentially like all fragmentations, splintered fragmentations of the same source energy. Some, you can call it God, you can call it whatever you want. And as you go down that funnel even deeper, right, there's what our brain is essentially receiving as our soul. Well, the next layer to that is that the only interpretation that we have of that soul, or the only way we can communicate it, is with our 3D world of Earth, our Earth school, as you were putting it. Mm-hmm. And we have and then on top of that, so at this point, the funnel gets narrowed down so much, right? Mm-hmm. And then we add all these extra layers of, first of all, nonverbal communication, such as, motion with our hands, our facial expressions, and then the tonality of our voice, and then more so down the language. And like the way you can view this is, so if you go down the funnel from the top, it would be like the collective conscious, a little bit lower would be like your soul. And then it's, in person or over Zoom call communication. The next step down would be a phone call, because now we're eliminating the hand motions and the facial expressions. Mm-hmm. And then the step down from that would be texting, and you're only getting the pure words. Yet, as we started off this conversation with, is you can still feel the energy of the person through all of those mediums, mm-hmm. which I find fascinating in itself.
Yeah, especially when it comes to language. I'm really fascinated by the idea of writing and speaking right now. Speaking truth, speaking desire, speaking to really anything, because I'm a firm believer that our words are magic, right? We speak that, we own that, and we declare that. And that itself is a spell, if you will, to make shit happen. And whether that's writing it down, I feel like it's more powerful when it's spoken, but words carry power. You should be impeccable with those words, because they're comfort, they're a way of connection, and they're also a weapon as well. So, be impeccable with your words and realize and understand that power.
Right. And, when you say that, my first thought is the words that you use with somebody else, but even more importantly are the words that you use internally with yourself. I think that's something that we overlook very quickly. It's like, well, what is the internal dialogue that you have with yourself? And I know manifestation is such like a hot thing right now, but like, if you are trying to manifest something, you need to look at the words that you're repeating to yourself every day as you go through your life. If you're making decisions out of scarcity, and a perfect example is with me, with money, I'm trying to, let's say, manifest, let's say $1 million. Well, if I'm not going to make a decision to get an Uber because it's, let's say, $5, it's like, oh, well, I don't have money. It's like, well, you're purposely almost putting a block between you and getting that money, because now you're impeding that, you're impeding that decision because you don't believe you already have that $1 million versus your current financial situation. And
Absolutely.
so, to just tie it back in, it's that, what is the internal dialogue? It's not just what I'm saying to Lauren, it's what is Clayton saying to Clayton?
Mm-hmm. And that's powerful too, because that internal dialogue is what sets up your energy and your vibration, right? If you're speaking to yourself in these low vibrational words of hate and shame and guilt and disgust, that's what you project. That's just fact. So really coming at yourself and approaching yourself like a loved one would approach you is so important, because that automatically puts you in such a higher place. And as you know, when that energy is shared, when you come from a place of high vibration, that infects in a good way, not infects in, again, language. It infects the person that you're in direct contact with, and could have the potential to sway that vibration up or down depending on where you're at. And as we know, those high vibrational things always win.
Right. It's like what do they call it? It's like it's a compound effect, but it's like, I forget what it's called, but like when you heal, it like inspires other people to heal, kind of
like
thing.
A ripple or a domino effect.
Yeah. It's the ripple effect. Yeah. Like where, you fix something in your life, and then it fix that internal loop in your head. And then you notice everybody else around you fix it. It just like happens almost, I don't want to say overnight, but it happens pretty quickly. And the people who don't want to fix it, they move away. And then you attract people that have also fixed it or are trying to fix it.
Exactly.
And I find that so fascinating in itself.
We're such powerful magnets, we do attract and repel exactly what we need and where we're at the time. And I love the analogy of a magnet too.
Well, let's dive into that analogy real quick, because I'm interested what your opinions are. Because for the longest time, I always heard it was like, oh, opposites attract was like the first thing you're kind of introduced to. And then I would kind of experienced it as you attract what you want, but I don't believe that anymore. And now it's you attract what you are. It is where I am with my whole, that was my whole breakdown and line of thinking. Do you have an interpretation with, how do you interpret the magnets and what you attract into your life?
So with this idea, I love to turn to the realm of Ayurveda for this. So, in Ayurveda,
I'm unfamiliar. I was just going to say I'm unfamiliar, so a little bit of background.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's talk about it. So Ayurveda is this really ancient, it's super ancient. It's it's basically the wisdom of this early Indian culture, right? And it's where, you take this, it's all herbal, it's all connected to the earth, and it's all relationship based. So breaking down the word itself, Ayu means life, and Veda means wisdom. So it's your life wisdom. And it encompasses every aspect of the being. It encompasses the food you eat, and really believing that food is medicine, and what you ingest is how you heal yourself. It comes down to community. It comes down to spirituality. It encompasses every single thing you could possibly imagine. And it is ancient wisdom, right? And what's powerful about it is it's still so potent and it still works. The whole realm of Ayurvedic medicine is so fascinating to me. And I have had such good experience working with an Ayurvedic practitioner. I can't help but bring it up. And so in this realm of Ayurveda, like attracts like, right? And like increases like too. So let's say you have a cold, right? You're stuffy, you're physically cold, you don't feel well, you feel stagnant and stuck, right? If you think about, well, I should eat a salad right now, or I should eat something cold, that coldness increases that coldness as well. So you're only increasing that sickness. Whereas if you're sick with a cold, you don't feel well, what are you intuitively going to eat? You're going to eat something hot. You're going to eat something with a little bit of spice to flush out the cold, because hot and cold are opposites, right? And you want to decrease what you're feeling at that time. And you can also think about this if you want to increase, if you want to feel more energy, more pulled to go do these things, you're going to do things to enhance this energetic wind that moves through you. So breath work and eating raw vegetables, things like that, things to increase wind and movement. So as far as manifestation, I think that you attract what you are. I think that what you put out there is directly what you receive. Now, that could be disheartening to some, because gosh, for the longest time, I struggled with insecurity of like, I'm not this expert. I'm not any special or anything great or grand, right? This insecurity and this self-doubt and this low self-worth. But you can put yourself in the mindset of, yeah, but I want to become that. I want to become an expert. I want to become something great. I want to become successful, and directing that energy there, then everything starts to pull into you, and the universe really does give you what you need. Of course, not like you would expect it to, because why would it?
Never
but
is.
it definitely will throw at you what you are putting out there.
Yeah, that's actually a really cool practice. So before we dive into that, it was called the Ayurveda.
Ayurveda, yeah.
Ayurveda. And it was this old Indian tribe, you're saying, that that figured out, or at least their whole thing is based on is it essentially just based on being what you want to be? Like if you want to be warm, do warm things?
Kind of, sort of. It's such a broad, I wish I was explaining it better, but basically it's a realm of medicine. It's naturopathic medicine. And it deals, back in ancient India, you didn't have all these, you don't have the technologies that we have today to really, make medicine or treat things, but they learned how to develop relationships with what they could see at the time, right? And what they could experience at the time, which is what you see and what you feel, what you touch, what you taste, and developing, diet, developing lifestyle, developing their own medicines out of the earth to heal that. It's kind of a sister science to yoga, if you will.
Okay. Was it developed like around the same time?
It's very ancient. Yeah. It's very ancient.
That was really cool. And so then if we take the Ayurveda and move it towards our magnet analogy, it's essentially just that you attract what you are. It's not that opposites attract. So have you put any thought into the idea of like, why do we believe that, or where in culture it became that opposites attract, and why are we not, telling people that, well, no, that's like the opposite, pun intended, I guess, of what it actually is, right? It's, no, you're attracting what you are. Like if you believe you are greatness, you're going to attract greatness. If you believe that you are in a negative light, I don't even want to say negative things in the hopes of not attracting, it's like, well, then you would just become that negative thing, as opposed to, we believe it's truly like opposites attract.
And I think that really just comes from literal magnets and this scientific realm that we, puts a lot of prestige on too. And, gosh, I'm such a science nerd. Like I get it. But yeah, just that idea of, you have a negative and a negative and a positive end, and those click together. I think that's where that comes from. And maybe moving forward, instead of saying that we are magnets, maybe I should say we are attractive forces. Maybe that is more clear verbiage, but magnet works all the same. You just got to break it down like we did.
It's just, just got to go into Ayurveda, tell them about, all this different stuff. That's pretty funny. So let's go back to, let's get back to you. And we left off that you wanted to be a veterinarian, and that took us down this whole rabbit hole of horses. So what did you want to be after a vet, or how long did you pursue being a vet for, I guess?
I bounced around a lot. I remember throughout like my teenage years, you know, obviously because there's so much pressure on you when you're in high school to like, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to go to college for? And yada, yada, yada. So it mostly bounced between being a veterinarian and for a very long time, for probably about 5 years of my life, I wanted to be a dancer. Like I wanted to be a ballerina. I danced for 15 years of my life. And so for a while that was the goal and I pursued that. And it didn't end up working out, obviously. I mean, I still love movement. I still use movement every single day. Movement is my personal form of medicine and it's a gift that I have to offer. So I'm very grateful to have found that so early on in life. But the whole social aspect and the pressure of the dance and showbiz world was very, very taxing on such a young mind. And I'm already such a sensitive human to begin with. My mom and I both decided like, yeah, no, let's get out of that world.
Was it very like emotionally like pointed almost is the word I'm thinking, where it's, oh, well, you have to do like this move so precise, or you have to do that move so precise, or you know, I mean, I can imagine what the entertainment industry is like, but I've never really been a part of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't so much the movement or the classes themselves that like was the struggle. It was the commitment to it. I mean, when I was really into it, I was doing workshops and auditions and, I mean, I was in the studio 5 or 6 days a week for about 4 hours a night, you know.
Yeah.
I was all in. And during those younger years, I didn't have a lot of friends because I was pursuing this dream of mine. And I was dancing, you know, that's all I cared about. I didn't have a social life. I didn't really have like a self-care schedule. I was beating my body into the ground every single day, you know, 5 or 6 days a week we'll say from the ages of 10 to 14, and traveling a lot to go do auditions and try to get these roles and getting these roles. And you have to, you know, schedule the practice for that. And it's a lot of commitment. It's too much commitment to ask of a child. I was a child and I was putting so much pressure on myself to attain all of these things and make it all these places. And then of course the body image thing comes into play, right? I was told I was too big to be a ballerina. I was too curvy. And, I'm very normal, you know, like
For sure.
there was no reason for any of that to be said other than this expectation of like, you're a ballerina, so you have to be this big round. And that is an ugly side to the business. I think that we're definitely getting away from it. I haven't really chatted with anyone in that industry recently, so I'm not sure, but that was a huge reason for me getting out, because I did develop an eating disorder. And my mom was just kind of like, all right, you're done. And
That's
I
the
agreed.
line.
Yeah, that was the line. And it's a good thing. It's a really good thing, because then I became more active in school and I started caring more about, you know, having a social life and having friends and making connection and also trying other things. And, you know, I still move to this day and I'm grateful for it and love dance, love everything that it did for me.
Do you because you're saying you still do movement, I know you do yoga. Is there other dancing you do, or have you seen any similarities between yoga and being a ballerina?
Yeah, absolutely. So movement for me, I love to use the word movement because it's not restrictive. I am a person who doesn't like a lot of, like, even saying the word routine or structure kind of makes me, ugh. But I do give myself, you know, because, you know, rhythm, it's this balance between rhythm and flow, right? So I say movement because it's not always going to be the same thing every day. I just know I need to move my body, whether that is, I love intuitive dance. Put on music and however that wants to come out, however that needs to be expressed, that's how you move. If I'm struggling with something, like let's say I'm struggling, what's a good example? I was struggling with shame and guilt a couple weeks ago. So I danced to what that shame and guilt felt like in my body. And I just let it move. And doing things like intuitive movement, like ecstatic dance, and then having a fun, structured ballet aspect of it, it's really just what you're feeling in that moment, for me anyways. And I love yoga so much because it does give you that structure to cater to, like, this is how a flow is set up. You have a teacher guiding you from this posture to this posture to this posture, which feels good for this masculine energy side of you, right? It feels good to have this structure, this routine, or this guidance. But in the midst of that, you get to dive into a more feminine, creative aspect and move into what you're intuitively feeling. So it's really awesome balance. Yoga is. I'm so grateful for that practice.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting duality you kind of pointed out there. Is, there is that, even in dancing, you have those masculine versus feminine elements involved. Whereas it sounds like being a ballerina would be extremely masculine, actually, in nature, with how, I'm just assuming here is that you have to hit certain points, you have to, extend your leg a certain angle, you have to spin a certain rotation, versus then you would flow into something like yoga, which is a little bit more, has that feminine flow to it, which has like a little bit more of the blend that you're talking about. Versus then, if you go completely feminine, would be like your intuitive dancing that you're speaking of with, okay, what is the expression of shame or guilt feel like coming out in dance, which to me sounds like a fascinating exploration.
Yeah, it is super powerful, especially, and if you do struggle to put emotion into words, into verbiage, move it out. Your body will know how to do it. You don't got to do it in front of people. You don't have to do it in a big ecstatic dance circle, but just go into a private place and just a safe space where you feel comfortable and really feel into that emotion and move however it guides you. And it's a huge energetic release when you get into it. And when you let go, you can really clear some shit out. But it's absolute medicine for me. And, like we spoke to, everyone has a unique medicine that they have and that they hold. Movement is mine.
That's awesome. It's, like you were saying, like, probably is on your laundry list of, if I feel this way, try movement to feel this way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Movement makes me feel connected and released.
Released.
Yeah.
And so this is something actually in my life that I want to see what your opinion is on it. Because I know and I'm bringing it up as myself because I know I've talked to other guys who have felt in a similar nature as me. So whenever it comes to dancing, like, I have a tendency to, let's say, not dance or keep it very basic, right? Like, maybe I'm just bouncing to the beat or something. It's not like this crazy, it's not this like feeling of trying to intuitively express shame or guilt whenever I'm dancing, which sounds a lot more chaotic. And so, I'm in this realm now of, okay, is it because I am a more masculine male? Is it because I am a masculine male and I'm okay with not expressing myself through dance? Or is it because that this is actually the way I feel the dancing expressing, even though I'm not dancing? But to me, at some level, it feels like a blockage. So I'm not sure if that kind of, the question, I guess, in there is like, kind of, how does that resonate with you? Is it something that, if a guy is, or even a female, isn't able to fully dance, I guess as I'm even talking this out, does it feel like to you that's like a sort of blockage that should be addressed, or a sort of movement that should be explored more?
It's interesting you bring that up because I know, and I've met many, many women who have this fear of dancing in public, right? So I can't say that I fully understand what that feels like because I've never, I don't give a fuck. I'll dance anywhere. But a lot of people, they it comes from this place of insecurity, right? Like, I can't express this. I don't know how, I can't feel it in my body, and I can't embody this emotion and express it through movement. For me, yeah, that feels like a blockage. It feels like a disconnect between emotion and embodiment is what that sounds like to me. And not saying that you have to dance to embody. Maybe your embodiment looks completely different. Maybe your embodiment is, yoga. Maybe it's Tai Chi. Maybe like you do jujitsu. So maybe that is how you embody and work through your emotions in a moving aspect. But yeah, it's definitely coming. People who do have this huge, what's the word I'm looking for? This huge aversion to intuitively move and from an emotional basis. I think there is definitely a block or a disconnect between what you're feeling and how to express that.
So there's something there and maybe like you're saying, you would rather have a different way to express it than through,
Absolutely.
movement or dancing. Yeah. So that's interesting. I'm just trying to think that through.
Absolutely.
Maybe I'll try to throw on a stereo and get in my bedroom and just close the door.
Yes.
See what happens.
No, that's the best way to do it. Oh my gosh. The amount of times I've just danced in my bedroom, just having a bad day. And I know you need to move your fucking body. You need to do something. You need to work through whatever this is.
It's just like the energy becomes stagnant or trapped.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, I've got so much fire in me already. Like it tends to boil. Things do fester and they ferment and it gets gross and I can feel it in me. It needs out. I need to cleanse. It needs to be pushed out of me. It needs to be flowing. So yeah, try some movement. Throw on your favorite song.
It's crazy too, right? When you talk about, let's say, internal blockages, right? You could have past things that occurred to you, but it could also just be that you've been sitting in a particular situation, physically sitting for so long that your body's just now at rest and it's not ready to move, or you're not in that state of moving the energy where it needs to be moved.
Absolutely. And, I think I do want to point out everyone is different. Not everyone does want to move for medicine. You might get into that place of it. And, yeah, you might be sitting in that place where, you've been physically or emotionally sitting for a very long time and you feel stuck in that place and your body doesn't want to move. That's cool. But the important thing is to realize, how do you want to move that energy? Because it needs to. That's what it's supposed to do. And when you don't, that's when all these blockages occur and things get backed up.
Do you think it's possible, and because I'm just thinking through what you're saying, right? After I've sat for a while, I need to, at least the bare minimum is stretch, right? Once we finish this interview, I'm going to stand up, I'm going to do some hip things, just to open up. And that's the movement, right? But I'm now trying to think down, what's the bare minimum you could do is do you think that you could even get to a place where you don't even need to move and that you could just use your mind to, I don't know, circulate blood flow or, loosen up your joints to some extent? Or, I mean, and I have no idea whatsoever if if that's possible, but to me, it feels like you would always need to at least move your body in this 3-dimensional plane at some level.
I'm right there with you on that. I think we're in these physical bodies for a reason, and we're here to experience this world, through this body. What a gift. What a fucking gift to get to experience Earth in this vessel, right? And I think for me, my opinion is some sort of movement is so vital to our overall well-being. I'm sure there's some gurus and some energy masters out there who can sit and move the prana, move the chi, move the stagnation throughout with simply their mind. I'm sure they're out there. I think if you want to say average person, I don't like that word because
average. There's no such thing as average.
Exactly. But for, for someone like me, I'm in this body for a reason, and the reason is to move it. And if you think about our ancestors, like, we were not meant to be stagnant. We were meant to move. We were meant to explore. We were meant to go out there and experience the world through this vessel. And movement is, I mean, it's so powerful.
Right.
And it's such a blessing too.
It's something I kind of always tell myself, or at least something I have told people, is they usually are coming from this place of no movement, right? Where it's like, wow, I haven't worked out in several months, or especially people that are coming out of the new year. I mean, maybe people got some New Year resolutions, so hopefully that gets you in the gym for a bit. But they come from this place of, oh, I haven't done it for so long, I shouldn't do it. And my thought process is like, well, it's almost like if you haven't done anything, you're kind of in a good position almost, because what you can realize is if you just do one thing, that's an infinite increase from doing nothing. So like, if you haven't worked out for the last, like, you know, let's say year of your life, if you do one push-up, you are now infinitely better than you have been here the rest of the past year. Like,
I would have to agree with that. I think that's a great way of looking at it, because it's so often you hear people say, well, I mean, I didn't work out at all last year. What's the point now? Like, it's too late for me. No, just do a push-up and you're already better. You know, what a great place to start with, like, like fresh, and from, okay, I'm going to just add a little bit at a time, because that shit compounds, you know, it's powerful, and you just got to do a little bit more every single day.
Right. And it's just like building up that ladder, right? Just building up, and it's like, all right, just do one push-up today. All right, do 2 tomorrow. All right, do 4 the next day. It's like, in the way the compound effect works is you're going to be doing 1,000 within, you know, the matter of, I don't know how quickly that would happen. Probably within 2 months, you'd be doing like 1,000 a day if you just doubled every day. Now, obviously, I'm not saying highly recommend that to everybody. That's just a hypothetical. But you know, the fascinating thing is that it, you know, if you have, it breaks it down such that, like, and you could do that with anything. It breaks it down with anything. If you're running a podcast, if you're trying to do yoga, it breaks it down such that you can achieve anything or create from any point in your life, because it's okay. Well, I did nothing. It's like, that's a perfect place to start. Is like, you have to start at zero. And so anything you do will literally be an infinite increase in any direction that you're trying to go. And so it's like, starting from zero is honestly one of the best positions to be, because, you know, if you're, let's say, Amazon, you know, for them to get to the next level, it's like, there's so much more that they need to add in order to just make a 1% increase, versus you. It's like, you can make an infinite percent increase just instantaneously.
And I love the idea of starting from zero, because then every action you take after that, it can be done with intention, and it can be done with passion, and from a place of, this is a full-bodied yes for me. Like, maybe they don't like push-ups, but maybe they want to go do a squat. Maybe they want to walk down the block and then walk 2 blocks the next day. You know, it's coming from a place, when you start it with nothing, or from a place of zero, you have so much power, and you have so much potential to take action. And there's a lot of opportunity for action coming from that place.
Right. It's like a way to, like, kind of reframe the absence or the negative, that it's like, oh shit, like, you're right, I have no responsibilities, so I can create any responsibility that I want. And so I was going to take that into a conversation about debt, but I don't really want to go into that negative light.
I'm good with that. I'm currently in the midst of reframing my relationship with money.
Same.
It's a tricky one, you know, it's really tricky. I was afraid of money for a very, very long time. And just this year started getting into, while it's not the center of your focus, or, like, you know, the goal, you got to have a relationship with it in this world. You have to. So how can we make this fun? Not even fun, how can we make it approachable? Because for me, it felt so just terrifying. It felt like a mountain that I had to climb, and there was no way I was going to get to the top of that.
And so how were you, did you then, if you saw it as a mountain, did you break it down into smaller bite-sized chunks at some point?
No, I mean, it's still very much a mountain. It's still there, but I'm not looking at the mountain from a perspective of, I can't climb this. I can't do it. I don't have the equipment. I don't have the physical capability to climb it. I'm shifting my mindset for money into a place of abundance. And so I've invested a lot into myself over the past year. I mean, I did a yoga teacher training in Costa Rica. That was a huge investment. I got my certification in life coaching. That was a huge investment. I went to another retreat in Costa Rica to not only participate, but to be a part of learning how to run a retreat so that I can facilitate one in the near future. And that was a huge investment in money. And I, traveled a lot, and all of these things really add up. And it's the most money I've ever spent on myself in my life. That was terrifying until I saw that it comes back.
Yeah.
And giving that money, when you invest it for yourself and from a place of good intention and knowing that it's going to make you more wealthy, just automatically you hand the dollar over and you say, I'm already richer because I just invested in something that matters to me and something that is going to help me grow. Therefore, even though I just spent a couple $1,000s on something, I'm getting it all back. It doesn't matter when it comes or how it comes, but it's going to come back to me. I am richer by paying this money and moving, because money is energy, right? It's just another form of energy. And I am already richer by moving that along with the flow of how it's supposed to. And just that shift alone is giving me the courage and the confidence to really sit down and be like, all right, let's look at what you spent for the month and what you spend it on, and getting into that ick. But really just reframing, it did a lot for me.
Is that kind of like the secret sauce that you found, where it's just like, yeah, this is investing, like I'm investing this, like I am going to get this back. I am putting this energy out so that it returns to me in a different form.
Yeah. It's my secret sauce. It's the secret recipe.
It's just the self-talk.
Yeah. Self-talk. And just every time you do it, handing over the money, I am already richer. I am richer because of this.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't come back monetarily, right? Even if it comes back in experience or an energy exchange or a connection that you made, you're still richer because of it,
Yeah. No, I totally am on board with what you're saying. I have been starting to look at money the same way, right? Because the only thing that is, real in this reality is energy. Like, it was funny. For a while, I always said like, oh, energy and matter are the only two things that exist. And then my brother pointed out, he's like, well, don't you know Einstein's famous equation? It's like E equals mc squared. I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, energy equals matter times the speed of light. And I'm like, shit, like, so it's all just energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm like, how do they overlook that? Like, so, to your point, and to further this conversation, it's like, it is all just purely energy. So if we have this mental construct built up of being afraid or in a scarcity mentality of anything, from love to money, it's like, that's going to always escape us because we're that magnet that's repelling that energy. It's like, all right, well, I'm afraid of money, so don't give me it. It's like, all right, the magnet's like, universe is like, all right, we won't give it to you. Like, we don't want you to waste it, or you don't want it. Like, you're afraid to have it, so why would we give it to you?
Exactly.
And just by changing that internal dialogue, it's like, all right, I am spending this money to invest in myself so that I have that money down the road, or that, and like you said, it comes back in different energy. And this kind of comes back to when you were talking about faith, because you get into that mindset of like, well, what happens if I don't have money at this point, right? Like, for instance, I've budgeted X dollars to make it through, certain number of months without a job. And it's like, I don't want to go back to the corporate life. And so it's like, I am putting my energy out there in form of this podcast, for instance, and I am hoping that that energy is going to, at some form, I am believing, I have to have that belief that it's going to transform, in a sense, into, money down the road.
Mm-hmm. And it will. It will, because
Right.
you believe it. You truly believe it. And I mean, kudos to you for doing this, man. Like, it really speaks to this idea of knowing what you want and knowing your desires. And I believe you spoke about freedom a couple times, not just in this conversation, but in previous conversation, and knowing that you desire this freedom and to form the relationship with money to make it work, and really trusting that it's going to come back to you, because it will. It absolutely will. There's no way it won't. Like, right. Not for a second do I believe that.
Right. And it's like, it's also putting out, because what was it? I lost my train of thought there. It's that level, like you were saying, of like enjoying what you do and what you want. Because I remember even, I'm on this huge kick right now where I'm like, oh, it's all about passive income. It's all about, being able to escape the rat race. And my brother also pointed out, he was like, well, is it really passive income if you're always having to make these interviews? And I thought about it and I was like, well, I guess not 100%, but I'm getting something out of it, right? Like, even just this conversation, I'm getting something out of, having you on, understanding your view on the world, and being able to then, I feel like we get something out of it by sharing this with other people. So then they're like, oh shit, like I didn't think of money that way, or I didn't think of dancing that way. And it's like almost empowering or infectious to even just have these conversations, in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially when you have a podcast with this type of content, you're absolutely richer. Every single time you do an interview, you get richer and richer and richer. And it's cool that you can realize that, and just know that wealth isn't just money. Wealth is so much more.
And that's probably a huge distinction in its own rights, right? Like, I mean, you're now I don't want to pronounce it wrong, but a life coach. You're now a life coach. I got a life coach and a yoga teacher. And it's like, I'm sure that falls in the same realm of, even if someone gives you $100, let's say, to coach them, it's like the session, it's not just the $100 you're receiving. You're also receiving that energy of helping them, progress down their path of life as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, besides the monetary exchange and like the feel good exchange of knowing that like I helped, someone grow in a direction of their dreams and what they truly desire, it also gives me a wealth of inspiration. And it comes from this place of, I have to practice what I preach. So I'm guiding my clients into a place of, where is your opportunity for action? Does this feel like a yes? Does this feel right for you? And what steps can you take in the next 3 days? What can you do today to start down this path, to start in that direction? And I have to be congruent with that in my lifestyle, right? Like I gain so much inspiration from listening to my clients be like, oh, I did this and I did this and I feel better. And like, now I thought this and then that was a no. I need to be doing that too, to really walk the walk, talk the talk. It's always so inspiring to work with someone, see their growth, and then step away from it and think, okay, well, how can I grow? What are my opportunities for action? What am I not taking a hold of? What can I let go of? It's never a linear experience, and I always get something out of it. Probably just as much as they do.
And that's like so amazing in itself, right? Because then you're putting yourself to remember, all these things that you need to be doing throughout your life in order to get that ball rolling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
my clients.
Go ahead.
Oh, nothing. You go ahead.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like, do you see yourself, I guess, because you were just saying like you're a life coach now and doing yoga teaching. Do you kind of split your time between the two of those now?
So I'm not actually teaching yoga right now. I got my certification back in June. The intention behind that was to never teach, but to deepen my practice. And it felt like it was the next step in my journey. And it's something I'd been wanting to do for years. And the time finally came where I was like, all right, I need to fucking do this shit. And I can tell you the story of what steamrolled this whole year into everything that I've done this year.
Please do.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So before I start into that, I will finish up with, you asked a question about splitting my time between teaching and life coaching. So not teaching right now, but doing that teacher training gave me the connections to this awesome life coach certification program, which led me to this awesome community of girls and women that are the most supportive women in the world, the most vulnerable I've ever met, and that truly do want to see you succeed. And gaining that community and that education and the connections, that has done so much for where I see my life going in the direction I want to go. So I'm doing a little bit of coaching on the side, as well as my day job or night job of bartending, however you want to look at that. But maybe we'll start teaching soon. Well, we'll see. Who knows?
If you need to,
Yeah.
It could be a little bit of fun.
Yeah. Oh my God. It could be so much fun.
I mean, that sounds like a solid setup, right? You got the life coaching and then the yoga on the side.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really comes down to me. Time resource is what gets me every single time. I feel I'm at my most healthiest with money I've ever been. My energy is more consistent than it has been ever in my life. I still have crashes, but I'm a lot better at managing my energy. The biggest thing for me is time.
And now
I spread myself thin.
That's something I struggled with a lot. You really just got to pick those core desires and go for it. And so with all this like energy, is this a part of what happened with your steamrolling to help you get to where like your past year?
Yes. It encompasses everything. So this happened, actually, this is really fitting that we're getting into this today, because what started this whole journey of my 2021, which was the biggest year of growth in my life, started on New Year's Eve, 2020 into 2021 last year. Okay. And decided to take a little trip with my friends on New Year's. They dropped LSD. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a couple grams of mushrooms. And it ended up being the most intense and profound trip of my entire life that I've had thus far. And it was a big one. It was truly a big one. To give some context, going into that night and that trip, I was probably it was a really low state. I was very much depressed. I had lost my job for the second time due to extraneous bullshit that I couldn't control with, mandates and shutdowns and things of that nature. I had a very unexpected and traumatic death in the family, and I had never lost someone. I'm very fortunate. I had never lost someone like that before. So that was heartbreaking in itself. And I'd also had a huge falling out with a very good friend, and that was devastating. And I didn't know how to navigate life after that. So going into that trip, I made my first mistake I was like, well, I want to escape, I want to get out of this reality that I'm in because I'm not happy here. Mistake number one. And I know better. I know better than to, I have a really, really, really great relationship with psychedelics. And I know better than to go into a trip wanting to escape. That's not what you do. I mean, you go into a trip to look inward and to look through that microscope of psychedelics into your inner being. So that was the start. So we took our doses. I took a dose that I had taken in the past several times, and I had an idea of what that was going to feel like in my body, and I was comfortable with it. I was good. I was like, that is the perfect amount for me to enjoy my time, to get a little release, maybe a little introspection and escape. And those mushrooms hit really quickly, really, really hard. That trip built with such intensity that I wasn't ready for it, and I wasn't expecting it either. I remember thinking to myself, about an hour in, I thought to myself, wow, this is really good acid. And then I stopped and I realized, I'm like, Lauren, you didn't take acid, you took mushrooms, because that's how intense the visuals were.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, the whole room was moving, everything's moving, and all I could do was move with it to try to find my way through. And I felt the panic building, right? I felt it coming. I felt the anxiety. I felt the darkness. And I went upstairs. We have a deck up on the roof. So I looked at my roommate and I was like, hey, I need a minute. This was really intense. And as I was telling her that, every dirty, shame-filled, hate-filled thought about myself and my life bubbled to the surface, and I couldn't escape it. It was right there in front of me. And I remember I was running up the stairs to just get a breath of fresh air, to feel the open sky, to really remember that, like, you're okay. Like, you're in another realm right now and you're all right. The mushrooms took away all my senses. I couldn't see, I couldn't hear, I couldn't taste, I couldn't touch, I couldn't smell. And I sat in complete darkness for what felt like a lifetime. I remember I was on my hands and knees looking for the ground. And like, obviously it was there because I was on my hands and knees, but I couldn't feel it. And I remember like reaching up and pulling my eyes open because I was just seeing darkness and I couldn't see anything. And in that moment, I remember saying to myself, all right, you're here, sit with this. This is mushrooms. This is medicine. This is very intuitive medicine, saying that this is the time to sit with all of this and figure it out, because you haven't yet. You haven't dealt with it and you're not happy. You're not happy with your life. You're not happy with who you are. Let's do some things to fix this. So I remember, like, obviously my senses came back. And I remember looking up the sky and thinking, like, I do have a choice. I do have a choice in how I make up my reality and what I do with my life. I don't have to be a drunk. I don't have to abuse substances. I don't have to be addicted to love or be addicted to relationships to feel a sense of completion. And then that steamrolled into, all right, let's do something you're afraid of. Let's go to yoga school. Let's go international. Let's figure it out, girl.
Wow. I mean, that's, terrifying and beautiful at the same time. And so was it kind of the main takeaway of that you needed to do something that you were afraid to do?
The biggest takeaway is something's got to give. I was stagnant. Yeah. I was doing nothing. Like I said, I was a drunk. I was drinking to get to yoga classes, if I'm being honest. That's how horrid my anxiety was. It was rampant. It was uncontrollable.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm a person with a very addictive personality. Like, I get addicted to substances, to alcohol, to people, to situations. And I realized that had to be a huge thing that I dropped, and something's got to give, because everything I was doing in my life, I wasn't happy with. I was not happy. And I look back at myself from a couple of years ago with so much compassion. Like, gosh, I was just trying to figure it out the only way I knew how, and the only way that society taught me how. Right. Like, I really want to just give my previous self a huge hug and a big old kiss on the forehead and be like, girl, you did the best you could. Like, I'm proud of you for getting yourself to this place. And I'm really grateful for the relationship I have with psychedelics, because that might have been something I never would have seen or sat with or dealt with, because it's fucking dark being in that place, and it's scary, and you feel alone, and you don't want to sit there. But when you do, you can really take away some huge shit. And I'm grateful for the medicine giving me that. As scary as it was, as terrifying as it was, and as gross as it was to sit in that moment, I needed it.
Right. And something I find, fascinating and kind of ironic about the whole story that you kind of just laid out. Now at the end of the story, you're saying that it was something you needed to do, it was something that needed to happen. But like at the beginning of it, and I completely agree with you, is that if you're in that dark place, you probably shouldn't. Take these, drugs, take psychedelics. But the catch-22 of it is like, it's like, well, you were experienced, let's say, with psychedelics before this, but yet still found yourself in a position knowing not to do it, still found the way to do it anyhow, and realizing like it was something that, obviously set you on this path to get you through to where you are now and have this radical year that you did have.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if like, it's just an interesting dilemma that kind of comes up.
It is. Yeah. And it's super fascinating to me, just the intelligence that intuitive medicines like mushrooms and ayahuasca have, right? They know exactly what you need. And like, even though my intention going into it was to escape, no, I didn't get that. She didn't let me. She said, hell no, you're going to sit with this because this is what you need. And that is the really beautiful thing that I've had with every experience with mushrooms, is that I get a takeaway every single time. No matter how big or how small, there is always something. And that trip actually spurred a 45-day microdose journey. Right after that, I started on December 3rd, and I was like, all right, cool. Mushrooms gave me this clarity. Like, let's see how far we can go with this. And I will say it got me out of a depression. It got me back to feeling like myself. It wasn't the be all end all, but it put me in this place of creativity and surrender and really just wanting to discover myself more deeply and do the things that scared me and do the things that made me nervous, that I knew were going to make me grow, that I really did want, but I was really insecure and was scared to do them.
And look at you now, you're beaming with confidence.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It was a phenomenal year. It was simultaneously the most difficult, the most trying, and also the most satisfying year of my life so far. And it's really just because I got to wake up and I got to really dive into what are my desires, what matters to me, and how do I want to show up? How do I want to show up for myself, and how do I want to show up for the world?
Right. It's like you chose, going back to our conversation earlier, it's like you chose to be a human for, 70 to 90 years. It's like, well, what do you want to do with that time? Like, how do you want to be here? How do you want to enjoy this human experience?
Absolutely.
And there's an interesting quote by Carl Jung that this reminds me of. And it's, the quote's like, it's said that no tree can reach its leaves into heaven without its roots reaching down to hell.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those quotes that like always like, when I hear stories like this, it's like, it's so difficult to, it kind of comes back to that, like being at a place of zero, it's like, well, if you're at this place of so much, let's say anxiety or depression, it's such a part of that human experience that you almost, and maybe it's easier said now that, we're on the other side, but it's like, it's such a powerful place to be because you can find so much truth about life and like the direction that you need to take your life from that place.
You absolutely can. And that trauma really does do a lot to reveal, right? It shows us what is not aligned. It shows us what life doesn't have to be like. And even though it sucks going through it, there's a reason for it. It's a lesson, and you have to take out of it what you can get. Now, you may not have deserved that trauma or deserved that hell, but you were there and you went through it. And how do you want to come out of that?
Right. And like keep moving with it.
Exactly. And also, like, if you're out there, you're not alone. You're not alone going through the hell. Like, I see you, I hear you, I love you. Clayton loves you. Like, this is what this is about. And that aspect of community and finding that support and people who just want to hold you, no matter how much of a mess you're in, no matter how shaken up you are or how low, people do want to love you, and they do want you to follow your heart, to follow your desires, and to be who you truly are. And that has been probably the most healing aspect of this year. Besides everything I did, is just finding community, finding that support.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I guess I've try to cultivate something like that, but maybe I need to take another stab at it. But like what you're saying is, it's people find that I believe that people find themselves in a place where they have nobody to turn to, nobody to talk to, no one to open up to and be vulnerable with. And I know I put together a group of some sort, but maybe I need to, reignite that, where it's like, I want that to be at least an aspect of this, where it's like, if you literally have nobody else, like if you think you have nobody, it's like I don't want people to be in that place where it's like, oh, well, I don't have anybody. It's like, well, there's always, I want people to be, it's a scarcity mindset. I want people to think that there is somebody who is willing to listen, willing to, extend that time for them to just hear what they have to say. And sometimes people just need to talk. It's not even, that they need advice or, usually they can find their own answers, but maybe I'm going a little too deep on this. And
no, that hits the nail on the head, honestly. And I see it time and time and again as a coach. Like, as a coach, you don't advise. You're not a consultant. You're not a therapist. You are holding space. You are a big glass dish with a mirror at the bottom to say, I am holding you. I'm holding everything you are, and also reflecting back to you exactly what you said, exactly your tone, exactly the emotion I picked up on. What do you want to do about it? How do you want to go about that? And 90% of the time, people just need to be held. They want the space. They need that space to just talk, just
right.
contemplatively be listened to. That in itself is healing. I don't know when as a society we got away from storytelling and just chatting and talking in circle, but simply speaking to what you're going through holds so much medicine. It's so healing just to talk and just to have someone listen.
I think there has to be something with, like, it comes back to the energy, right? If you're avoiding that feeling, if you're avoiding that story that you keep telling yourself, it's only going to make it compound, because then it becomes like blocked within you. But once you're able to even just vocalize it out loud, it gets that energy moving and flowing through you, even though it's just your vocal cords. It's like, well, the vibration of your vocal cords somehow dispersed it out into the universe, and now you're aware of it. And now you're able to, heal from it almost, or to, you're able to kind of pursue it a little bit. And again, if anyone has a therapist, I think there's some great ones out there, but I think where they tend to come up short is they don't hold that space, right? It's like, let me diagnose like what you have. Like, even if it's just diagnosing anxiety, it's like, they're just there sitting off check boxes to figure out what's going on. It's not, okay, I'm just going to hold space for you to talk openly and non-judgmentally. It's just, okay, let me figure out what box to put you in to see if I need to give you treatment, if I need to, label you as clinically insane. And when in reality, it's so much more simpler than that, where it's just holding non-judgmental space for people is what I think we've missed out in the whole psychology field. Just, again, I'm not a professor or anything, but just from what I've seen, it seems like that's what has been missed in the whole psychiatric department of Western medicine.
Yeah. Because there's this really magical and potent energy in just sharing, right? And I can tell you from my experience, from my personal experience, I went through some trauma early in 18, 19, 20, that time frame. Went to therapy for it, went to counseling for it, and did not even, I thought I had healed from it, right? But I hadn't. I'd shoved it down. I just shoved it. I hadn't acknowledged it. And it wasn't until I shared the specificity and every single detail of that trauma. Gosh, it was a month ago at the retreat I was at with 9 beautiful women who held the space so perfectly and just listened. I shared that trauma with its fullness, with its full truth, every detail, every feeling, every hurt, every feeling that I was feeling of guilt and shame and self-hate. I shared it for the first time. It had been 7 years since I talked about it, since I had truly talked about it. And in that moment of just being listened to, of not like, okay, well, you are obviously, anxious and depressed and like, how do we fix it? No, just let me talk. Just let me talk. And after speaking to that, I remember the tears came. I couldn't breathe. I was shaking all over. And it's just because that energy that had been stored there for 7 years, got to come out. She got to come out. She got to express. And God, it was massive. It was 7 years of healing in one small moment. So powerful.
It's beautiful.
Just to be heard, just to be held.
Yeah, it's such like a fascinating concept that you don't really even need to do anything. It's just, it's just freeing to know that if something happened, whether it was to you, whether you hold shame or guilt or whatever, it's like the sheer fact that you're able to acknowledge it is like the medicine that you need to move past it. And whereas medicine today, like you're saying, just covers it up. It's where Western medicine is, it treats problems, it doesn't cure them. And where you can just cure it by just talking about it.
Absolutely. And I will say this about, you bring up an interesting point when you said that just speaking to it is medicine and it's healing in that aspect. Because how often do people really get to talk and share without judgment or space, right? So when you do get to step into that space of, I'm going to share my truth and my trauma and my shit, it feels heavy, right? It feels so heavy. You don't know why it feels that heavy. And the reason is because it's not just yours. It is not just your weight. It is not just your thing to share. It is a collective of people who have gone through a similar experience that have not spoken or have not spoke to it, have not talked about it, because there's not a space to do that. So what you're feeling is not only your own trauma and your own low feelings and your own weight, but you're feeling the weight of so many other people in the society who haven't had the chance to talk about it. And it feels so heavy because you're shifting a paradigm in that moment. And that is powerful.
Wow.
And I think people forget to think about it like as a collective, like we share that. We share experiences. We can relate to each other.
That's actually really fascinating. You put it in that light, because there have been times in my life where I have felt that, but it wasn't in relation to trauma. For instance, as an example, and I'm going to try to not be too specific about it, but I was seeing a girl, and due to circumstances, I was about to go against essentially a social norm. And I remember like she got out of the car and I like called her because I was like, well, I want to call it out. It's like if something weird happens, I'm of the mindset, like, I just want to say it so we're on the same page. And so I like shifted against the social norm. She got out of the car and I called her, and I was kind of like stuck there. I was like, I know what I want to say to you, but for some reason, like, I'm not saying it and I don't know why. Eventually I like got it out and said it, and she was like, oh, like, yeah, like, I don't know why you thought that was a big deal, but like, yeah, it's totally cool. Like, I get it. But it was just me vocally and vocalizing, a paradigm that was in the construct of a relationship that I decided I wanted to go against, let's say, but I wanted to make sure she was on the same page of why I did it. And and maybe it's easier now because I'm, trying to speak my truth a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And it probably wasn't very traumatic, but it was still something that was like maybe a fear of judgment being cast on me for going against this norm, where I was like, no, like, I'm choosing to do this because of this. And I just wanted to let you know that. And meanwhile, to her, it's like, okay, like, yeah, that's totally cool. I don't know why you like made a big deal out of it. And yet to me, it was like, this, like, it was the whole frog in your throat situation where it's like, dude, just say it. Like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. But in that moment you were reprogramming yourself, right? So
Yeah.
of course there's going to be a little bit of glitch and a little
Yeah.
bit of hesitation, because you got to, get the new code and say the new thing, and also carry the weight of all the other people in the world who did not speak their truth and weren't transparent either. Transparency is huge in that aspect, and just coming from a place of, this is it. This is what I
Right.
think. This is what I feel, and having emotional generosity with that. It's so difficult. It's heavy, but I mean, what I've noticed is once you start sharing your truth, you really can't stop.
It's freeing.
It's so freeing. It feels so damn good.
It really does. Cause it was funny too. Cause I knew in that moment, I was like, my internal voices were just like, dude, just say it. You know how good it's going to feel after. Just say it. Just say it.
Yeah.
And then after finally saying it, it's like, oh, that was no big deal. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't think it'd be a big deal. Like blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty crazy how that stuff works out.
Yes. Yes. Love that. Love that you're speaking your truth.
I heard you at one point start telling about microdosing. So that's something that I've actually messed around with myself as well. So I'm interested in what your experience was with that. Like how many, how much were you taking per day? How often were you taking it? And like, what was, how did that like kind of tail off with your, let's say 2021 mental shift?
So this particular journey, I did it for 45 days. I don't know where that number came from. It's just the number that popped into my mind of I need to do this for 45 days. So I went with it. And then I did a bunch of research because I'd done a microdose journey. Gosh, it must have been about 6 months prior to that, where I was dosing for 3 days, taking 2 days off, dosing for 3, taking 2 days off. But that one was only 3 weeks. And it definitely worked. At the time I was on anxiety medication, and it got me off of that anxiety medication, the previous one. And in this 45-day one at the beginning of this year, again, I think I was on anxiety medication, was able to come off of that. And what was my schedule? My schedule was a 3-day schedule. So I'd take a dose day, and then they have what's called an afterglow day for your second day. And then the third day is your baseline day. So you dose, skip, skip, dose, skip, skip. So you don't build up a tolerance. And it really gave me an appreciation for the subtlety of the magic of psilocybin, knowing that the next day, your afterglow day, that psilocybin is still in your system, and it is still expressing itself, and it is still healing, even though you don't feel high, or you're not tripping, or you don't feel like a huge energetic shift. There's confidence in knowing that that is in my system, and that it's doing the work it's supposed to do, and it is making my life better. And then that third day was simply just to not build up tolerance, because I still tripped heavy in the midst of that. Love a nice heavy trip. So I didn't want to build up a huge tolerance, right? So that was my schedule for 45 days. And yeah, like I said, it got me off of anxiety medication. The drinking definitely slowed down. I was listening to music again. I was getting up out of my bed again. Started to eat healthy. Was still struggling with alcohol, but that was a battle that took quite a few months to get over.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you were balancing out. Starting to balance it out pretty well with, getting out of bed, which is very important.
Yeah.
You got food in your diet, you got your music back into your diet. And so, what was the process like with alcohol to kind of wean that off?
Well, I was a heavy drinker until I went to YTT. And it was right before YTT, I sat down and I realized that I couldn't remember a day in the last year and a half where I hadn't had a drink, and doing some reflecting on that. It was usually about 4 to 5 drinks a day. I'm a bartender, right? Was at that point, still am today. Didn't think I could do it sober. I can, obviously. But it was really tricky to navigate. But going into YTT, I realized oh shit, I'm an alcoholic. I'm 4 to 5 drinks every single day. like I'm drinking to get to yoga. I'm drinking for social engagement. Like this is not good. This is not okay. So going into YTT, that experience was a sober one. And it was also a huge detox and diet. It was gluten-free, sugar-free, and vegan for the whole 3 weeks. And and being, you know, in a place of sobriety with no alcohol. The first day we sat down for our dinner, and I looked around the dinner table because I was looking for my beer and I couldn't find it. And that hit me in the stomach like a freaking brick, dude. I was like, oh, Lauren, no. You sweet, sweet soul. Your beer is not here and it won't be for a while.
We're not doing that anymore.
So, and that was tricky because during that time while I was in this awesome place, I went to Costa Rica to do this, and I was surrounded by absolutely wonderful people who were super open, super vulnerable, and like, yeah, like we're here, let's get it. I still had cravings. I was like, guys, all I want to do is walk down to that little shack by the beach and grab a beer. That's all I freaking want. But I didn't, and very proud of that. So I came back from Costa Rica and obviously had a very enlightened experience. I mean, it was 3 straight weeks of super conscious conversation and really deep conversation, and everything we did mattered, you know, from the food we ate to the excursions we did to the workshops we did, everything mattered. And then I came back to San Diego, and I swear it was culture shock, because all I wanted to do, all I knew how to talk about was subtle energy. And I can't go up to someone at the bar at my job and be like, oh, how's your subtle energy doing today? Like, people want to hear that. They're like, no, give me a beer. So I felt very abnormal and very out of place for the first couple weeks, and had to definitely have a couple decompression sessions with some friends and just like, y'all, this is what I'm feeling. I feel fucking weird. Like I can't talk to people right now. But in the midst of all of that, in this midst of feeling not myself, like feeling the most like myself that I've ever felt, but also trying to fit into this lifestyle that I had left behind and that I had changed. I was grasping for it, right? Because I wanted to feel in this comfortability again that I had before. So a friend invited me to a baseball game. He's like, let's go to a baseball game. Let's grab some beers and eat some food. And I'm like, okay, yeah. Lauren does that. Lauren likes to go out. Okay, we can try this, like talking myself into it. And we get to the game. I get myself a beverage. I drank it and half of another one. And I looked at my friend and I said, I am done. He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, I am drunk. I am confused. I am foggy. I don't feel well. Like, I'm done. I need to go home. And he's like, you're a drink and a half in. What are you talking about? I'm like, I know. And I'm telling you, I'm done with this. I cannot do it anymore. And so I went home. And then after that, it was a lot easier than I anticipated to actually get off of the alcohol, just because anytime I would even try to have a glass of wine, I felt like absolute garbage, right?
It's crazy.
It was just a huge detox that I went through, and it really took that break and that feeling of like, okay, this is how I could feel every single day, knowing that I hadn't, in the past, I never woke up not hungover. But also wanting to stay in that area of comfortability of the lifestyle that I had built for myself. So it was a lot of letting go of people, letting go of activities, letting go of social situations, and
which is difficult. I mean, that's so difficult in its own right of making such a social change, right? Because I remember I went through like a very similar situation. When you stop drinking alcohol, you identify with it a lot, and not even that, but the friends that you have when you are drinking, right? There's this, you can still kind of hang out with people when you're not drinking with them, but from an energetic perspective, it's just the vibration's different. It's like if you're hanging out with someone on shrooms and you're not on shrooms, it's like you just have that different energy. And this kind of goes back to our earlier point in this conversation, where you're just in a different energetic frequency almost, and it makes it more difficult to relate in such regards.
Absolutely. And you start to take on that energy, right? So I had an experience at the beginning of December where I went to our work Christmas party with all my friends, and we work at a bar. So everyone, is drinking and having a great time, getting super, super rowdy. And I'm not. I've got got my box of sparkling water that I gave to the bartender and said, keep these cold, please. And just watching all my friends, continually drink all night, which honestly, no judgment. They're all fantastic people. I love them so much. And I was sitting there holding them, hugging them, talking with them for 4 or 5 hours. I went home, was home by 11, got a really decent night's sleep. Didn't drink a sip of alcohol, woke up the next morning, dry heaving, pounding headache, hungover.
Really?
And I've never experienced that before, right? Because I was hydrated. I drank water all night.
Yeah.
I mean, I got 7.5 hours of sleep. There's no reason for me to physically feel like I know what a hangover feels like, and this is a hangover. And I didn't ground when I got home from that. I didn't breathe. I went straight to bed, and I swear that energy latches on and it sits in you. And if you don't release that, it'll manifest as the energy is a drunken energy.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Hungover. Yeah.
That's trippy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really interesting. I had to reach out to a couple people and just kind of figure out, I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, why do I feel
what just
like
happened?
this? Yeah. Like that is not normal.
Did they know right away? Were they like, oh, yeah, you didn't ground?
Yeah. I talked to a couple energy healers and a couple trusted friends who are just very energetically sensitive. And they're like, Lauren, you're a channel. You know this. We've talked about a couple, those people and I had talked about a couple different experiences that I've had just taking on other people's energy and channeling that. And they're like, they're like, it's okay. Like it's just how it is. And you just need to make sure you protect yourself and, ground yourself when you get home from a situation like that, because it is a lot of energy.
So what would be considered grounding? Like what would you have needed to do such that you would have rid yourself of that alcohol or, that drunken energy that was building up within you?
A couple different techniques are just meditation, any type of grounding meditation where you sit down and you breathe in white light and you exhale any negative as smoke, as sludge, as however it wants to come out. Soaking your feet in hot water and salt is a great way to ground, as far as like getting your electrical frequency back in the norm. They say the best way to ground is to go stick your feet in the ocean with your, on the sand. Cause all that salt and all the, chemical reaction grabs the free radicals in your body and exports them. So those are kind of my go-to, and really just breathing. Just taking a minute and be like, I'm releasing anything that's not mine. It's not mine. Let it go. Okay. Just simple activities like that.
Okay. That's pretty powerful. That sounds like powerful stuff in itself. It's just normal. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess I don't want to call it normal, but normal conventions, let's say, to reduce stress or anxiety would just be a mean for increasing your vibration in the positive manner.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I say the word simple when it comes to stuff like that. And I guess what I should say is it's simple, but not easy. And it's really just taking the time to intentionally say, I'm gathering up all the energy in my body that's not mine, and I am releasing it because it does not belong to me. It does not serve me. And it can be very quickly incorporated into a daily routine. Everyone can do it, which is super cool. I love how inclusive this whole realm of spirituality and yoga and consciousness is, because it all lies within us. We are all one. So everyone can do it, and everyone is a channel, and everyone absorbs and transfers energy. And it's just about learning and discovering and becoming more familiar with how your unique expression deals with it.
And that's, and I think what you just hit right there is really the crux of kind of what my whole mission is kind of with this podcast, is having these conversations about things that we can all relate to in our own way, right? Like, everything we've kind of talked about, even if you're listening and you think all of this is crazy and you're super analytical minded and you're like, oh, there's no scientific evidence of any of this stuff. It's like something that was said either by myself or Lauren, I guarantee you kind of gripped you a little bit, whether it has a positive association or a negative energetic association. That right there is kind of the truth almost that we're trying to get at here. That's kind of what this whole thing is, and what I guess Lauren is kind of pointing out as to what she is saying whenever it's like we can all relate to this or feel something to it. It's like, especially if something was said here and it takes you to a negative place, it's like, okay, well, why did it take you to that negative place? You know, I have a tendency to believe that it's you know there's truth there, but want to push it down, kind of like what we were talking about. Lauren, would you kind of say what would your opinion be on that?
I think that definitely hits it right on the spot. Like if you do have a negative reaction or like something doesn't sit well with you, that's not the time to shove it away. That's the time to say, okay, let's look at emotions in the broad spectrum and let's stop labeling them. Let's not label them as bad or good, beautiful or ugly. Let's just label it as an emotion, and it has a message, because that's what emotions do, right? They carry messages from our body to our brain, to our brain, to our body, right? So even if it does feel icky, stop dwelling on the ick and wanting to repress, and let's sit with it and say, okay, shame, we'll throw that out there. Like, okay, shame, I see you and I know I have this shame and I still love myself completely for this. What is the message you are trying to tell me? And sitting with it. And I think a lot of these negative emotions do come from a place of fear, uncertainty, insecurity, and really just, I think there's a level of confidence that has to be within to want to explore that realm of what is an emotion and how, or why did something that someone say make me feel like this? It's a deeper level of introspectiveness, and then we can all do it. It's just, taking out the connotation of positive or negative, I think is a really good starting point.
I like that too, because it goes back to like the whole part of the human experience, right? If you were some interstellar being of some sort, not having a human experience, you're not going to be feeling those emotions that you feel, whether it's, I'm about to say positive or negative, but whether it's a low vibration or a high vibration, there's a reason you're feeling what you're feeling. And to kind of touch on another point that you had there was, the idea of thoughts versus emotions. I remember a huge step in my kind of realization is like, you're not your thoughts or your emotions. So, like, what are you? It's like, so first of all, there's that separation of, well, I'm not my thoughts or emotions. Well, so then what are my thoughts and emotions? And then when you examine thoughts and emotions, kind of to your point now, is it has this like cyclic nature, and it becomes a chicken or the egg. It's like, am I having this thought because of this emotion, or am I having this emotion because of this thought? Mm-hmm. And if you're able to kind of break that loop and just say, no, I'm just having that emotion, you can then kind of go into the analyzing like where that's coming from, or that message that's trying to be sent to you. Because those thoughts are essentially covering up what the true message is that's trying to come through.
Absolutely. It's this really fun dance between the two, right? You get to explore both aspects of it, and you really get to lean into what feels right in your experience and in your reality, and what resonates for you and what feels aligned. It's not always fun, but I like to think it's fun.
It's an opportunity for growth.
Yes, opportunity for growth. Yeah. And we love growth.
I mean, I'm telling you, I've started viewing, pain, and it first came to me as like, if you're from an analytical mindset, if you're trying to grow your muscles and have a bigger and better muscles, you got to put some pain on it. You need to stress it. You need to break down the muscle tissue. And so the beauty of that is I actually started applying that to emotions. It's like, okay, well, here's my physical body. It needs to go through pain in order to grow. It's like, well, how do I nourish my emotional body? It's like, oh, it must need to go through pain in order for it to grow. So, anymore, the stronger that pain is, the more capacity you have for growing and to become a bigger and, I guess, better individual or more self-aware individual.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the pain, especially when you're coming from a place of not being super in tune with emotion, a lot of the pain comes from the novelty of it, right? You've never let yourself sit down and experience that emotion, and it's new and it's unexplored and it's unexplained. So of course it hurts a lot more because it's tearing at parts of your body and of your subconscious that you hadn't let it yet. But what's cool about that is the body remembers, and the next time you feel that same emotion and you let yourself fully feel it, it moves through those pathways so much easier, or I shouldn't say easier, but with more flow, right? It maybe not as, maybe it isn't quite as ragged or as jarring as it was the first time, because your body knows that, okay, I'm feeling guilt right now. And I felt that at this point in my life, and this was what happened, and this is how I felt afterwards, and this is how I processed that, and I'm feeling the same emotion right now, and I know I'm going to be okay because I let myself feel it in the past, and I'm letting myself feel it now. And muscle memory, mind memory, we are able to adapt and move forward with a little bit more ease.
Right. You're able to kind of, once you've identified what that feeling is, right? Because there's a, let's say, infinite variation of feelings that you kind of go through. Once you're able to identify what that feeling is, you're able to now see what those associated thought loops that you have attached to them, and what a better way to recycle them. And I mean, and like we kind of said with the reframing even earlier, it's like, what if you could train yourself that anxiety is actually the process in which you're going to get more money? It's like, what if every time you're feeling anxiety, it's because you're about to get $1 million? It's like you have that ability, the neuroplasticity of your brain to reassociate, those feelings. But like you're saying, you kind of have to go in and see what that initial cause is and see what needs to be rewired in order for you to break through to that next level.
Yeah. And also just going in it with the mindset of, this is human. We're supposed to feel this. We're supposed to go through this. It's part of the experience. And it's just such a phenomenal way to grow and to really heal, really, really heal, and to get to know yourself deeper. And, there's a lot you can do to, expunge the emotions, if you will, to help them travel through. So at the beginning of the podcast, I think you asked me, what are some things people can do to feel more into their body and their emotion? And something that just came to me is when dealing with anger, you can go and throw a tantrum, go outside and scream, punch the ground, spit on the ground, snot cry if you want to, give it back to Mama Earth because she wants it. That's why she's so upset right now, right? Because no one is giving her what they used to. They're not giving her their shit. She wants to absorb that. It's her job. So I love a good tantrum. I love to go to the beach, throw sand at the ocean. Don't throw it at anyone, obviously. Go throw it at the ocean, throw it at the water as hard as you can. And kind of rolling off of that, that's if you have any children in your life, that is a great way to teach them how to process emotions like anger or frustration. Take them outside, tell them to throw sand or throw a tantrum, and have that space, give them the space to really feel it, because this emotional intelligence, it moves more fluidly when it starts young, right? When you teach a child, okay, you feel this, but this is how you can healthfully move through this emotion and process it, not by hitting your brother, not by screaming at your mom, but go and have the tantrum, feel the feeling, and now let's sit down and talk about it.
Right. And it honestly feels like our generation is one of the first generations to kind of come across that idea. If I were to describe my parents' generation and kind of the way I was raised, even, it was more in the light of suppressing it or not talking about it. And I'm sure that goes twofold for guys as it does for girls, where it's well, emotions are feminine, so you're a man, so you don't get to pay attention to them, or you don't get to talk about them. You don't get to integrate them. You need to suppress them and not, think about them. And and here's the crazy thing about that, now that I'm thinking about it, is I don't know that that was ever directly said to me. Like, I don't know that my dad or anyone ever directly said that, but maybe
It's
through
programmed.
movies. Yeah, it came from somewhere. Like, maybe movies somehow like put that thought into there somewhere, or maybe it's just that, like, that underlying feeling or intuition that we've always had. I could just feel that from the people around me, that it was like, okay, stuff that down,
You're also carrying that from your ancestors too. So like you said, twofold for like your mom and dad's generation, and double from like your great grandma and great grandpa's generation. You carry that programming and that mindset through to you. And that's, like, again, with shifting paradigms, that's why it feels so heavy, because you are breaking, it's like upwards of like 7-10 generations of trauma that you'll carry with you, or programming that you carry with you. And that's why it's hard. That's why it feels so hard and heavy to shift that, because you're not just doing it for you, you're doing it for your ancestors as well. So yeah, I mean, especially with emotions, I mean, I do resonate. I think guys definitely have it really hard growing up, because, I mean, not so much this most recent generation, and our generation's coming more in tune, but definitely have had guy friends be like, oh, well, I wasn't supposed to talk about my emotions. I don't have a lot of, I just feel numb to them. They're non-existent. And it sucks. And like, even for myself growing up, I have a big personality, right? I have huge fiery energy. I am who I am. I'm dramatic. I'm loud. And I feel emotions very intensely. And I always have, and I always will. And it's a beautiful thing. However, as a child, I was told, Lauren's being dramatic. Lauren's too much. She's too loud. She's too wild. She needs to calm down. All of these things, I was to this or to that, or I needed to do this. And it really shuts everything down, right? You don't want it, because it's being told to you in this negative connotation. Like, what you said about, like, you're a man, like, and emotions are feminine and you shouldn't feel them, or something to that extent. Those weren't your words exactly, but it's this, societal pressure to not shake the room, to not feel the emotion, to not think for ourselves. Because maybe it's easier if you're numb, or that's what we're told to do. And it's not the case. That's not a human experience. That's not one I want to be a part of anyway.
Right. I mean, it's so much better on the other side of it. I guess the scary thing is, one of the scary things is that, like, very few people view the world in that light. And so it's that going against the grain, that it's like there's this extra layer to kind of push through and be like, well, I'm not going to be around very many like-minded individuals. And I'm thinking back to the alcohol situation, and it's probably also that maybe it's not even that there are so few people. It's more that my mind has been conditioned to think that they're not there because of the conditioning that I was brought up in. It's like, well, everybody drinks. It's like, no, you just know only the people you know drink. It's not that everybody drinks. It's just that you only know people that drink.
Exactly. I mean, you become who you surround yourself with, right? So and I'm sure you can relate, the path to sobriety is very lonely, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, they're out there. We've got sober brothers and sisters out there all over the place. It's just finding them. And it's this really, really awesome yet scary idea of invitation. That was what was hard for me, as far as inviting people to go do sober events with me. Like, let's hang out at the beach and, not drink. Let's, be sober together. And it's just that invitation that was so scary, but it's necessary too. And I think more people want to do it than not.
Right.
And there's already a huge amount of people that are out there that are sober. It's just it really comes down to, I think, location, like geographics a lot, like in San Diego and Pacific Beach.
Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. But they're for sure out there, and no one's ever really alone.
I need to go to OB a little bit to find them.
Yeah.
But there's certainly truth to that at some level, because I also know, going back to the mind, it's like, well, if you're not going to drink, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. And it's like, there's so many things, there's infinite things you can do, but you just have conditioned your mind to this like specific way of thinking for so long that you don't see the world in this other reality. You don't see the lens of, well, what if I don't drink? Like, what am I going to do if I don't drink? Mm-hmm. And that's probably where part of that challenge comes into, is to forcing yourself out of the norm, out of the social norm, out of that conditioning that you've brought up your whole life. And hey, look, if you're 100% happy with your life, keep doing your thing. Like, I'm not here to talk anybody out of it. But if you've noticed that there's things in your life that you wish were different, well, it takes a different approach to have a different outcome.
Absolutely. And that's the hard part, right? Shifting out of that lifestyle, going into an unexplored territory. Oh man, I had a thought and it left me. Maybe it'll come back. But it's this idea of grief. Something that I've been dealing with a lot is grief, and grief of a lifestyle that I used to have and hold and found very comfortable, and had a huge social circle and was never alone. And now not having it this year, and or having as much of it in the same way as I had previously experienced, is a more complete way of saying that, but really giving myself the space to grieve that, because it was a part of me at one point, and it is uncomfortable and it hurts to let go, right? Because then there's all this space. What are you going to fill the space with? Like what you said, like, what am I going to do? Like, if I don't drink? And I mean, gosh, just taking the time to grieve that. Still am grieving aspects of it, and really just finding what lights you up, finding the passions, finding what fuels you, what makes you, what really brings light to your life, and pursuing that, no matter how big, no matter how small. Could be the flower that you saw on your walk this morning, or it could be like a totally new hobby. But what's cool about letting go is you have so much space after that, and the possibilities are infinite.
And you feel lighter too. Yeah.
You feel a hell of a lot lighter.
You feel like you're starting to float, as opposed to just like in this stagnant space of nothing.
Absolutely. Feels good.
So the one, I realized that we've been going at this for a bit, and we still haven't really even gotten all the way through what it is that the way that your life has kind of unfolded. All right. I think we left off at Ballerina.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So that was age 13 or 14. And, from there, I wanted to be a veterinarian through the rest of high school. And, from there, things got messy after that. I entered into a marriage really young, and, that turned south really quickly.
Well, how old, do you mind talking about that? Like, how old were you?
No, not at all. So I got engaged when I was 17, and I was married by the time I was 18. And, it was to a friend I had known since I was 12. And like I said, I was from a very small town in rural Ohio. And the thing about small towns like that is you either, stay there, you go to college there, you get married, you settle down, and that's where you are, or you get the hell out. And I wanted to get the hell out. And it just so happened that my best friend that I had known since 12 was also getting out via the Marine Corps. So it only made sense to get married so young. And I look back at my previous self, and I just want to hug her, because she just wanted freedom. She wanted out, and she thought she had someone at her back to do it. And, that was not the case at all. And it was so many lessons for me. And really it was just, I think my biggest takeaway from that was strength. And knowing when something is not yours to fix, which is something I still struggle with too, for this very day. like I mentioned, he was in the Marine Corps. And what I've noticed with people in the Marine Corps, men and women, my more experience with men, but I'm sure it happens to women too. You either take it by storm, and you come out a person who is very organized and sure and feels supported and, is a go-getter, or you don't. You turn on to the opposite. And unfortunately, with my ex-husband, the case was he did not know how to turn that Marine aspect of himself off. And he did deploy a couple times to Afghanistan. And I'm not even going to pretend to know or to understand what he went through over there. Cause I mean, it was some shit. Like
Right.
it was hard. But it was devastating watching someone that I loved leave, watching a completely different person come back. So it came down to safety, really is what it came down to. 'Cause there was a lot of anger, and there was a lot of
Right.
ick that he went through. And, like in most abusive relationships, you turn to the person that's closest with you to release all of that. And I was that person. And so that ended. I went home for a while to heal, and I'm so happy I did. And it taught me a lot. It taught me how to let go of a dangerous situation. Like I think back to that moment, I'm like, that was a soul contract moment. That was something I had to come to, because I was raised very religious Christian family, and marriage was for life. So it was an internal battle of like, I'm going to let down every single person in my family if I divorce this man. Right. But also if I do not divorce this man, I will not make it. I won't. Right.
Was your family supportive when you came to that decision?
Once I told them the ins and the outs of what had been happening, yes. Okay. But like in a lot of abusive relationships, he was super charismatic. You would have never expected, Right. And also from this place, I learned what being a victim is. And I also learned how to not have victim mindset, because I held on to that story so tight for so many years of it. That was my identity.
This is who I am.
This is who I am. This is what I've been through. This is whatever. It's mine. It's fine. Like, no, it's not yours. Let it go. Like it, and it's not, Lauren, I tell myself all the time, Lauren, it's not your place to fix it. And I still have to, my dad, I'll talk to him about it, and he'll check me it sometimes. And he's like, Lauren, it's not your place to fix that. Like, you did what you had to do, and you came out stronger because of it. And I don't regret it. It's this really interesting polarity of like, it was the most painful 2.5 years of my life, but I don't regret any of it because it got me out here. I lived in San Clemente for a little bit on Camp Pendleton, and then moved back to kind of mentally and physically recover from everything that happened. And then a girl that I had met when I lived in San Clemente, I'd moved to San Diego, and I texted her one day. I was like, hey, do you want a roommate? And she said, hell yeah, get out here. Fast forward to now, I'm the godmother of her firstborn child, and we're still super tight. She's the best.
Love it.
She'll always have my back. But yeah, so that full circle on that tangent of getting married young was school. I was always in school, but the progression was really slow. I would just take a couple classes a semester. I bounced around to a lot of different schools. I worked for a couple of veterinarians throughout that span, that timeline. One was in Ohio and one was out here in California. And knowing that if I went into veterinary medicine, I wanted to work with equine species. So I wanted to work with horses or, large animal medicine, small animal medicine. It's really cool.
What species did you call it?
Equine.
Equine species?
Yes. Equine species. So like donkeys, horses, that whole realm.
Okay.
Yeah. Cows were cool, but not so much up my alley.
Not your vibe. They didn't mirror the emotion enough.
No, I need that emotional connection.
Neither.
So yeah, I worked on an ambulatory equine unit for.
Wait, say that again. Ambulatory equine unit.
Equine ambulatory unit.
Equine ambulatory.
Yeah, so we would get in the truck and go out and make calls and do everything at the person's house. Everything was on the truck, all the meds, all the equipment, an x-ray machine was on the truck even. Like, it was a really cool experience. And I met one of my closest soul sisters I've ever met in my life. Like, she's someone I've known in many lifetimes, as family, as a friend, as perhaps a partner. I don't know, but her and I, we just fucking clicked. Like, she's a super cool human, and I'm so fortunate to still have her in my life. And she makes such an impact on everyone she meets. Obviously, she's a healer. She heals animals, and she's so powerful in like her own way. But after watching her in this realm of large animal medicine, you're on call 24/7 and your work is your life. And I realized that I can't be tied. I didn't want to be tied to one city. I didn't want to be tied to one job. I didn't want to have my off time be, well, maybe I'm off, but I might get called out to an emergency. You know, it takes a special kind of person to want to commit to that. And I don't have that in me. Like, it's too much. It's a lot of pressure, and it's also a lot of debt to go to vet school.
Yeah.
It's really a lot of debt. And I don't like that.
No, you got to be committed. Might as well go to people hospital.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I didn't want to do that either. So, vet school went out the window, and who knows, maybe in like 10 years, I'll be like, hell yeah, I'm going to go to vet school. But for right now, that's in this season of my life, it wasn't going to fly. Still ended up getting my degree. I got a degree in biology, and have really done nothing with it.
Isn't that how it all plays out?
Yeah. But it'll definitely help me out in the long run. I've got some new job opportunities coming up, and the biology degree and the coaching certification, it's actually just a beautiful blend of what's going to happen. So
you want to drop anything, or you just hold on to it?
Yeah. So I just accepted the role as an integrative coach for this company that facilitates ketamine therapy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So thank you so much. I'm super stoked about it. It is kind of a dream job to be able to work in the realm of psychedelic medicine. I personally have not undergone ketamine therapy, but from the research that I've done, just learning the mechanisms of action and reading about people's experiences, it heals your brain. It actually reverses damage and atrophy from things like stress and OCD and PTSD and anxiety. So I'm beyond stoked to be able to be a part of that realm now.
That's super cool. Yeah. I mean, I've only heard about ketamine a little bit, but I never knew it to be like a healer. Is it from a plant?
Yeah. What was the question?
Is ketamine from like a plant?
No, I believe it's chemically synthesized.
Okay.
I believe. Don't quote me on that.
All right, don't quote it.
Someone wants to look that up and send me a comment. I would appreciate it.
You gotta sharpen up.
Yeah, I really do. But from what I can gather, it's chemically synthesized, and the mechanism of action that it works on, it's in the synapse. So you have like a presynaptic aspect of the neuron, and you have a little synaptic space, then you have the postsynaptic, and the biggest factor is it releases glutamate. It releases an extreme amount of glutamate into that synaptic cleft. And on the other side are the receptors. And ketamine will turn off one of the receptors and turn on another one, an AMPA receptor.
Are these in your brain?
They're in the neuron.
Okay.
So you have the neuron set up, and you have thousands of different receptors and neurotransmitters that go through your brain to signal whatever, get excited, or chill out, excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. And glutamate is excitatory. So ketamine binds to the neurons of the brain. Glutamate is released, and you get an increase in receptors on the other end of the neuron, which then it calls, or it signals to make this factor called BNDF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, I believe. I believe that's it. And then what that does is it signals for dendrite regrowth. So the dendrites are on your brain. It's these little hairy guys on the end of the brain, and they feel out for signals from the adjacent neuron. So with high levels of stress, those atrophy over time, right?
Okay.
And then what ketamine does, it releases the factors that regrow that, and overall just increases neuroplasticity of the brain.
Okay. So it'll regrow those hairs, and it sounds like it's basically just opening up, in layman's terms for me, and everyone listening, it opens up different neural pathways in order for your brain to explore different ideas or to rewire the brain, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah, you just nailed it. It turns your brain on. It turns your whole brain on. And this is at low doses, mind you. This isn't like a recreational ketamine where you're going into some kind of hole and having a super out of body intense experience. This is something that's done at low doses and over a course of 6 to 8 weeks, and that compounds over time.
Okay.
And that's how you heal. Like that's how you, on a neuron standpoint of actually healing the brain, that's how that is done. And it's super fascinating. I can't wait to be a part of it. I can't wait to learn more about it and really be able to help in that realm of psychedelic medicine. That's a dream come true.
Yeah, that's so cool. I've never experienced ketamine or messed with it at all. So it sounds like this is new. This is a new thing that's coming out. I mean, I know I've heard of it recently, but I don't think that ketamine's very mainstream at this point as being a psychedelic. Or am I mistaken?
There's quite a few ketamine assisted therapy programs around the country. It's the only psychedelic medicine that is approved by the FDA and is able to be prescribed to people. So these clients will actually take the medicine in their own home.
Oh.
And I mean, and you can do it at a treatment facility and do it in person. Who I am working for is going to be via, virtual rooms and connection that way. But I can't, what a great place to do it in the comfort of your own home,
right.
And it's such a low dose where you can be confident that nothing bad is going to happen. You're just going to have kind of a somewhat trippy experience, and you go into it. And that's the whole role of coach, right? You meet with them before the dose. You talk about intention and what are they working through? Are you depressed? Are you anxious? Are you experiencing whatever emotion that you want to get rid of? And is that your focus? Is that your intention? And then meeting with them after the dose and be like, okay, what did you download? What came through, and how do you want to integrate that, and how do you want to embody that?
That's super cool. Once you get that rolling a bit more, I'm going to have to talk to you about doing that. Do you need to see a doctor to get prescribed to ketamine therapy?
Yep, you do. There are physicians that will, and they're usually linked with whatever ketamine therapy facility you go with. They will have physicians that you meet with, and that will prescribe you. And there's either a coach or a therapist to walk you through the process afterwards and before and everything in between. So then
what usually would someone prescribe ketamine for? Would you just go to them and say I'm feeling anxious, or I want to trip balls, give me ketamine?
This is going to be coming from a place of anxiety, depression, or some type of mental dis-ease that you're experiencing. And knowing that from a therapeutic dose, you're not going to trip balls from it. It's not going to be that intense, which is a funny way of getting into, clients. One thing that they emphasize during the interview is how do you deal, or how would you navigate dealing with someone whose expectations of a psychedelic experience weren't met. So I have a feeling, since that was emphasized so much during the interviews, that is a hurdle that's often there to overcome, is because all we have, especially for someone who's never taken a psychedelic, all you have is bullshit propaganda,
right?
Of this is your brain on psychedelics or whatever. And it's usually more intense and, well, not always, but it's usually something scary or intense, or you get whatever, the propaganda.
Yeah. Reefer Madness. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah, exactly.
It's actually hilarious. It's actually hilarious. If you watch it now.
Yeah. But yeah, just how to navigate expectations and what is the polarity of an expectation, you know? It's
all that fun
really
stuff.
Interesting. I'm all about it, man.
I mean, it sounds super dope. Like, I definitely want to, you know, see if there's a way we can figure that out down the road. So I'll have to stay in touch about that, see how that goes.
For sure, man.
We'll definitely have to talk about it the next time you're on, more so.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, that's awesome. I mean, I guess we got through it all. It's a hell of a journey. We made it.
We sure did. Yeah. It was a big year.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, I appreciate you coming on, being so open about all this.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I'm going to get your links from you, and everybody listening, go check out Lauren's links down below. Do you want to, I'll give you the floor for a little bit. You want to tell people stuff to do or promote anything? Let you do that now.
Nothing comes to mind as far as promotion. I'm in this really cool timeline of, I'm going to call it gestation right now, like my own personal gestation with all this growth that's happened over the past, you know, it's been 6 or 7 months since June. I'm in this really cool aspect of, or in this really cool, geez, words are failing me. Wow, we have been talking a while, haven't we?
You got it. I believe in you.
I'm in a really cool place of gestation and growing and really soaking in everything that I've learned over the past few months. There's going to be some exciting things coming up for my life in the next few months. One of those is going to be a women's retreat that I'll be facilitating in April, probably at a national park, to be determined. The planning for that starts tomorrow, actually. So if you are into women's retreats, yoga, and nature, reach out, let me know, and let's chat. Let's talk about it.
Love it.
But other than that, we're good. I'm golden.
Well, sweet. Well, Lauren, thanks again for coming on. Everybody listening, thank you for making it to this part in it. You made it through the whole thing. This is the longest one yet.
Oh, no.
No, it's a good thing. I want these to get longer. I feel like you get more out of people, like you get more connection out of it, you know? And so I'm
happy to chat your ear off.
Yeah. No, hey, I know I learned something, and I hope other people are paying attention because I know they're going to learn something as well. With that being said, guys, check out Lauren's links below. You know, whatever you're listening on, please leave a rating, subscribe, comment, you know, do all the fun stuff, share this with people. I think that's probably the number one thing is, you know, pick 2 people on your phone and share this with them, because I know especially this conversation in general, I know it's definitely going to help people more than you know, just from everything we talked about with trauma. But other than that, I appreciate you conscious monkeys listening, and let's grow together.